Speaking. And Dan, look, first and foremost, I got to just get this out of the way. Thank you very much for being a fantastic friend, for being a fantastic running mate, for being someone that when you call upon him, he answers the call. Because last night, well, I needed you, buddy, and you came through for me. I was listening on my way back from a beautiful wedding. Shout out to the Watts. It was a fantastic time. Had a great time with my friends. And I listened to you break down apparently a 17-point loss for the Warriors. What the hell happened last night?
Well, first of all, don't ever do that to me again.
What?
You're really testing the limits of our friendship, pushing the boundaries, as they like to say, as I was relaxing and enjoying a beautiful Friday night. No, it was, of course I'm there for you. Enjoy getting an opportunity to talk about the Warriors and Warriors Live at a pre- and post-game show. But, that was Jonathan Kuminga taking a step backwards after he had taken 2 steps forward.
Whoa. We're not even going to get a minute into the show. We're already ripping the kid?
Not ripping him. It's just at this point, I think it's sort of matter of fact. I mean, there's a lot of what it is that we can sort of get into with the young man, because I do think that there's something sort of going on between his ears. There's a psychosomatic element to all of this and his approach to the game as a Golden State Warrior. And I emphasize as a Golden State Warrior.
Well, first of all, I don't even know if I know what that word means. Psychosomatic? I mean, first of all, I do think that last night was significant from a couple of standpoints. Jonathan Kuminga taking a step back, I think, was a byproduct of those choices. And the biggest one is obviously Draymond Green going to the bench and Jonathan Kuminga stepping into the starting lineup. And I feel like that's really where this all begins and effectively ended, because they got crap kicked out of them by the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are looking closer to the team that represented in the Western Conference Finals last year than the team that was kind of a below 500 right before this 4 or 5 game win streak that they've been on. They'll see them again on Sunday. But what did you expect when you saw, because I was at the ceremony, it was beautiful, lots of love in the air, and I see a tweet from Anthony Slater that says, Steph Curry, Brandon Pajemski, Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, and Kevon Looney. And about an hour earlier, it was reported that Draymond Green was going to be active for that game. So myself, I was intrigued when I saw the starting 5, and I think there's, again, a lot of different reasons for it that we can get into. But what was your first reaction when you saw that?
Well, it was Jonathan Kuminga's. It was predicated on Jonathan Kuminga's performance the night before. That is, Steve Kerr would say after the game, they want to maximize Jonathan Kuminga, especially when it looked as though he had turned the corner. And so if it's an opportunity to play more, let's get you into the starting lineup. And I think they wanted to ride those coattails of the 33 points and the career high that he had the evening before against the Houston Rockets. And they liked the matchups, and Draymond Green, of course, is going to close with the Warriors, but it was an opportunity to insert Jonathan Kuminga into that starting lineup alongside Andrew Wiggins. But again, I don't know if you want to hold off on getting into Jonathan Kuminga, or we can talk about, the lineup change, but it's an offense that's anemic. And I never thought I'd be saying that about a Golden State Warrior basketball team with Steph Curry and Draymond Green and Steve Kerr as their head coach, but they can't score the basketball. That's the second consecutive night they were held to under 100 points. The 90 last night was a season low, and it's clear that not only is it, Steph or bust, but the chasm between Steph and that next guy who's going to give you consistent points is getting more and more vast.
Well, I'm with you on that. The offense, to me, is by far and away the largest issue with this basketball team. In the first 15 games, they only had one in which they scored less than 100 points. Their last, 7 games, in which they lost 6 of them, they failed to crack 100 in 3 of them. That's pretty significant, especially in the NBA in 2024, with how prevalent scoring is, how quick the game is, and how many threes that the Warriors both want to get up and how many threes the league gets up. For you not to score 100 in a basketball game, that's pretty significant. I feel like I'm watching a college basketball game from the 1990s that's 60 to 55. Like those kinds of offenses that are bogged down. And Kerr actually said this after the Rockets game. that was 90s basketball. It was 93 or 99 to 93. And they won that game. They got just enough offense. But you can't win consistently like that. You got to be able to put the ball in the hole. And again, this is a team that's not going to average 120. They're not the Sacramento Kings. They're not the Atlanta Hawks. They're not the Charlotte Hornets. They're not going to play up and down and score at a high clip. But you got to be able to generate some consistent offense. I think the Timberwolves went on a 23 or 25-2 run over the course of 8 minutes. You can't have 8 minutes in which you only scored 2 points.
Did you think you'd ever be saying that going back to 2016, 2018, that they're not an up-and-down basketball team that's going to score a lot of points? I mean, they started all of this. They were the team that recreated the landscape of the NBA. And when you look at them right now, it's a team that's trying to do it a different way because he's trying to work towards his strengths, and the strength of that team is obviously that they have supposed depth and just enough scoring. I think part of the problem with the Warriors is it's not only relegated to Jonathan Kuminga, but it's a host of guys. We can get into Brandon Podziemski and do a whole show on him. There are so many guys. There's no room, or there's zero tolerance, I think, for someone like Podziemski not to be able to score the basketball. Now, he doesn't have to be that second guy to Steph, but he sure as hell got to score more than 8 points in nearly 40 minutes of play like he did against the Houston Rockets. And I get it. He does a lot of good things on the floor, and I've been one of his strongest supporters. But I said this last night, I don't know if the end's justifying the means any longer. And when you have Podziemski, who, if I'm defending the Golden State Warriors and they're coming to town, I'm like, we don't have to necessarily worry about that guy.
I was going to say, do you have to defend him?
Do you have to defend Looney? Do you have to defend Trace Jackson-Davis? Do you have to defend GP2? Do you have to defend Draymond Green? Yeah, a little bit, because his offense is better this year. You see where I'm going with this? There's too many of those guys on this team. Like, you cannot have that many quote-unquote role players. Somebody has got to score. And again, you don't have to give me 25, but you sure as hell better give me 12 to 15.
Well, you have to be able to do something well. And that's probably the biggest issue that plagues this team is they don't do enough things consistently well, even on the defensive side. If you look at, again, the 15 game start that the Warriors underwent, they were a top 5 team in terms of defense. The last, again, 7 games, they haven't been able to keep teams out of scoring the basketball enough, and they are predicated on what they do defensively. I think that's another indictment of the offense. If they don't get stops, if they don't prevent teams from scoring, they can't get out and run. They can't get easy looks. And in the half court, they struggle. But that's where, to your point, if you don't have enough ones or guys that you can get the ball to, you have to lean into the few that you actually have. And I think that's where Kuminga comes into play, and that's why he was inserted into the starting lineup last night. It's because, number one, he played obviously extremely well against Houston. He scored a third of their points. He had 14 in the fourth quarter. He was sensational against the Rockets, and that's a top 2 defense in the NBA currently. But you have to give he, along with Curry, some sort of opportunity to play alongside each other and figure out if they can both offensively figure this thing out. Wiggins is the other third player that you have to respect offensively, although he's not a 20-point per game scorer. But those are your 3 guys. If those 3 players are not getting you 60 to maybe 70 points a game, it's going to be very hard for this team to crack 100 consistently.
And now Wiggins, as well as Moody, day-to-day, and could be out for an extended period of time. He's got the bad ankle.
I was a little surprised Wiggins played last night.
That ankle was questionable going into that contest, so you're right. So now it becomes even more dire when you think about where you're going to get your offense from. You know, when you think about it, we always do this every year. Like, we have this rush to judgment. Oh, the Warriors, the depth in the first week of the season. My God, look what they've done. They went on that road trip and beat 3 of the best teams in the NBA and went 4-1, taking care of the Celtics on the road, beating OKC, and we are so quick to anoint them
championship contenders.
Yeah, they're going back to the Western Conference Finals. It's all back. It's back, baby. Meanwhile, the Milwaukee Bucks are trash. Minnesota's underwhelming. All of this within the first month of the season, which is why they say you just got to let this breathe, give it 20 to 25 games before you sort of recognize just how good or bad a basketball team is. And I think it was interesting that we saw two teams that I think might be headed in completely different directions, where Minnesota was a sub-500 team, and of course, they hit rock bottom when they lost to Sacramento, and it culminated a 4-game losing streak and under 500. And then, of course, you had their leader, Anthony Edwards, who just, he went off on the team, although he did it in sort of a wry way with a smile on his face. But it was a young man being a leader, saying there's too much finger pointing, we're soft, and he included himself in that criticism. And now Minnesota has gone on a 4-game winning streak since that fire and brimstone speech. And I think as you pointed out early on in the show, they look like Minnesota of a year ago. And what was Minnesota of a year ago? Head and shoulders above the rest of the league as far as defense. Clearly the best defensive team, long and athletic, with Naz Reid and Daniels and Rudy Gobert, and tough to score against. And then Anthony Edwards doing what it is that he does, and that's what propelled them to the Western Conference Finals. And they look as though they're getting that back. Meanwhile, Golden State is headed in the other direction.
But what's the biggest difference, you think, between Minnesota and Houston? Because Houston has also won with their defense. They're a team that's, I think, 15-9 now after their loss.
I think Houston is one of those few teams in the NBA, both East and Western Conference, where you look at them and you're saying, okay, that's a good team, but who's their go-to? Who's their number one?
No. I'm 100% with you. Anthony Edwards is the best player between those two teams by far. But my question is more aimed at why the Warriors were able to succeed more offensively against Houston without Curry, without Draymond. They have both those two players back, and they take a step back offensively 2 nights later against Minnesota.
I think, again, a lot of it just goes back to Jonathan Kuminga. You said how he and Steph have to learn to play together, and seeing more of them could benefit this basketball team. I also think that it could be the worst thing for the Warriors and for Jonathan Kuminga. There's just something about when Steph Curry and Draymond Green are on the floor, he becomes a different player. He's a different person. And I think it gets, we talked about how if Jonathan Kuminga was on any other team aside from that of the Golden State Warriors, why it's unfair to compare him to what is really one of the strongest draft classes in recent memory, where you have like 8 guys who are all impactful. Usually in an NBA draft, there's maybe 1 or 2. And in his draft class, whether it's Cade Cunningham or Jalen Green or the Josh Giddeys or the Şengüns of the world, Franz Wagner, all have been really good basketball players for their respective team. And part of the reason why we defend Jonathan Kuminga is because, well, he's with the Warriors. He's not getting an opportunity to go play in Orlando, make your mistakes, play for 35 minutes, and learn to score in this league and be that guy that can warrant another contract. Because he's with the Warriors, he's getting limited run, and he's doing it in a much more restricted structure. But now I'm beginning to think that the fact that he's playing under Kerr's tutelage and under the watchful eye of Draymond Green and Steph Curry is also the worst thing for this guy, because it doesn't fit his personality. And I think he becomes a reluctant shooter when Steph Curry is there. And if he's missing a couple of shots, he's deferring. Whereas the other night, with no Steph Curry, no Draymond Green, he did what we've grown to expect of Jonathan Kuminga. He got sped up, made some mistakes, threw the ball away, had some turnovers, but he knew he wasn't getting pulled. And he wasn't looking over his shoulder at Kerr saying, am I coming out now? He's like, well, who the hell are you going to play? I know I'm staying in this game. And as a result, we saw what it is that we saw with the 33 points, but more importantly, towards the end of that game where he just took over. And I think he was a confident basketball player without those two. And with the return of Steph Curry and Draymond Green, he loses that confidence, especially if he's missing a couple of shots. He becomes very, very reluctant, and he can't be that guy. He has to lose the conscience. He has to be a little Klay Thompson, Trae Young-esque in order for him to be successful, I think, with the Warriors.
So Curry's the problem.
Indirectly, yes.
I say that facetiously.
No. But I think that there is some, as it relates juxtaposed to Jonathan Kuminga scoring, yes, he is.
Well, I think that last night I don't know if I agree with the whole looking over your shoulder thing last night. I think that this is what is naturally going to happen to a 22-year-old that's really getting his first opportunity to be handed the keys. You're going to see some roller coaster rides. You're going to see a game like he had against Houston where he goes for 33 and he's the man and he's closing it out. And then he's going to play against a really good Minnesota team that also I do believe is differently constructed, better defensively than Houston. And he's going to struggle. But he still played 29 minutes, which is second most behind Curry. He didn't get to the free throw line, which is a bit concerning. But he didn't shoot it particularly well. And I just think that this thing is going to take some time. My biggest question is, do the Warriors have enough time? And does Curry believe, and also Draymond from that standpoint, because he's the one that got benched. Whether you want to call it that or not, he got demoted. He's not starting. That's something. We can listen to him in a little bit. But how long are the Warriors going to be willing to give Kuminga as a featured player? And also what the purpose of that is. I don't know if you saw that yesterday, Shams Charania had a report that the Warriors are again, I mean, it's like just regurgitated blabber. But they're looking for another star to pair alongside Curry, as they've been for seemingly the last 3 years. But I thought the timing of it was pretty interesting that it happens the morning after Kuminga goes and has a career night. That to me indicates that this is where the clock is now on Kuminga, for better or for worse. You have essentially 2 months until the trade deadline, and the Warriors have to figure out what they have in a condensed period of time, because remember, he hasn't had the first 3 years of his career to experiment and to play and to do things the way that other members of his draft class has. The clock's now on Kuminga, and I think the Warriors have to lean all the way in, or they have to go back to what they were doing before. So what they did last night to me is naturally going to happen when you try and feature a player that has never been featured before. But you might also get a game like Wednesday, in which that player who's featured helps you win against a good basketball team.
Well, I think he was featured a year ago when Draymond Green was out, wasn't he?
But that was by process of elimination. Like, my point is, Kuminga is now being specifically chosen over Draymond Green to start at the power forward position. That's pretty significant. I realize that Draymond is coming off an injury. You want to keep his minutes down. There's also reasons that Kerr can sell to Draymond why this is good for you, especially in the long run. And that's also something that I did note. But this is the first time where they basically have picked 0-0 and said, you're our guy.
Well, whether it's process of elimination or the fact that he's now jumped Draymond Green and is now inserted into the starting lineup, however it is that he arrived there, the idea of the roller coaster has to come to an end, and he has to be a consistent scorer. And I guess I'm one of those that's just run out of patience. I don't really care.
You are a patient guy, though.
How he got there, but he's got...
Just not with sports.
Well, not with Jonathan Kuminga. I don't know, Ev, that it's ever going to... I just don't know that it's ever going to happen with the Warriors. And we've seen this before. There is precedence here. Think about Harrison Barnes. And Harrison sort of, it's different, but you knew the talent was there, but he was so inconsistent. And he was a frustrating player as well, just to take you back. But the moment he got beyond the shadows of Steph, Draymond, and Clay, where he didn't really know am I the one? Am I the two? Am I the three? What option am I? And he goes to Dallas, and this was Dallas before Dallas became, Luka-centric, and he balled out. And he's done the same thing in Sacramento, where he's like more of a number one. And I think it depends on your personality, but I think that for Jonathan Kuminga, at the end of the day, the best thing that might be for this young man is to get traded and go to a Charlotte, go to an Orlando. Well, not Orlando, because Orlando's good now, but go to a team that's in the middle of a so-called rebuild and be the guy. Because I really do think that there is something to the fact that he is just not the same player when those two guys are on the floor.
888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings, Dan DeVoe, Warriors this week, every single Saturday from 9 to noon, chopping it up about the Dubs, who now, after a loss last night, 107-90 to the Minnesota Timberwolves, are 13-9. They have lost 6 of their last 7. I think last night indicates a significant shift towards what they're trying to get to, or maybe just a response to how they've played, which is relatively poorly, especially, as Dan pointed out, on the offensive end. From the 415, the Comcast Business Text line, first of all, shout out to Arts Cafe on 9th and Irving. No is hanging out, having a beef bulgogi hash brown sandwich. That sounds
9th and Irving.
That sounds delicious, yeah.
Let me know if...
Inner Sunset.
Yeah, I know Inner Sunset. Is Herb still there on Terraville? Please get back to me.
Well, it's a little further down.
It is. I'm trying to think 9th and Irving. There used to be Polly Ann's.
See, you guys have such a big neighborhood to try and broach. It's almost impossible. I can barely get through all the Mission. I mean, I don't even know all these streets and different nooks and crannies.
Well, it's alphabetized, if you ever know the Sunset, right? So I think it starts at, what is it, like Ortega, Pacheco, Quintara, what's R? Somebody give me R. S is Santiago, T is Terraville, U is Yoloa, V is Vicente, W is Wawona.
You're from the Sunset, right?
No, I went to school at St. Ignatius.
Oh, there you go.
I know the fog.
Oh, there you go.
I went from St. Ignatius to Seattle, and people were saying, "Oh, from California to Seattle, you're going to hate it." I'm like, dude, I grew up in the Sunset, or I went to school.
Well, there's a lot more precipitation.
Yeah, not much.
I mean, you live in rain for 9 months of the year.
Yeah, but that dark cloud that hovers over Seattle and doesn't move for 8 months is very similar to the darkness.
Fog is one thing, but the occasional sideways winds off the sound is something completely different.
We're both miserable in the Sunset and out in Seattle. Now, Sunset used to be, firemen and cops, and it's, just like everything else, a lot. It's unaffordable for a lot of people, but it was really a blue-collar, awesome neighborhood with a tremendous sort of backbone and clear identity. I don't really know what it's like now. I haven't spent a lot of time out in the Sunset, but you got the beach.
You're tucked away in your castle.
What you would always do at St. Ignatius or anybody is, like, especially when you're a teenager, is you go to the 7-Eleven, you get your beers, and you go down to the beach.
They just let you get beers in high school?
No. You'd have to get somebody to buy up. So what you would do as a kid, you would stand in front of Mr. B's out on Terraville, and you'd wait for somebody who looked as though they were of age, and you'd say, "Hey, man, can you buy up for us?"
Rivera. That's the street you were looking for.
Rivera. Thank you very much. And so someone would go in, and they get your beers, and they come out and, down the block or in the alley, they give you your beers, and you're like, "Thanks so much. Keep the change," or whatever. I can't tell you how many times we got ripped off when we were sitting there on Irving or Terraville or Ocean and just waiting for the guy. And then we go inside and we're like, "Hey, is there a back door to this place?" And Mr. B's like, "Yeah, out there." I'm like, "Oh, God, we just got scammed again."
Well, that's a rite of passage. If you don't get ripped off for beer money, I don't know if you're living. 888-957-9570 is the number. Again, Evan and Dan with you on Warriors this week. Let's go out to, let's stick in the city. Let's talk to Gloria in San Francisco. Gloria, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. I'm doing pretty good. On my way to walk around Lake Merced, and I thought, let me chime in. I was on an emotional high on the evening before when the Warriors were able to beat Houston without Steph and Dre. I was really cautious. I didn't really want to watch the game because I just almost put it as an immediate loss. But they played gritty, and they were able to make their mistakes. And that game did look like a game back in the 90s where no one could really shoot. But the grit of the Warriors' defense prevailed, and they were able to just score just a little bit more. But with a team like Minnesota, they have so much length. And I know Houston is athletic, but I agree that Minnesota is, to me, a better all-around team and definitely can score. It was difficult to see the Warriors not be able to shoot. And I'm really concerned about Buddy Hield right now. He's in a major slump. And Moody is right behind him in another slump. And we really need their scoring. And to the point about Kuminga playing when Steph and Dre is on the court, Both of your points rang true in my mind. I would think that Kuminga playing on a team that is an upstart trying to get their identity, he would be able to make his mistakes and not have a big brother looking over his shoulder. But with that being said, could they get the right type of player for Steph to be able to compete for another ring? What are your thoughts?
Thanks, Gloria. I'm actually glad that Gloria asked that question because this is something that I've been sitting on for a minute. The idea of bringing in another player to play alongside Curry, to me, it's as much about fit as it is about also skill and just overall level. Like, the Warriors are offensively anemic. They can't put the ball in the hole. But Steph's part of that problem sometimes. And it's not just like if you bring in somebody else, he's all of a sudden going to transform into 2016 Steph Curry. I'm not saying that Steph is the biggest issue that plagues this team, but he's older. He's right now dealing with ailing knees. He clearly is not going to be able to get his shot off without some sort of other help, a la Buddy Hield, or maybe it's Kuminga or Wiggins. But down the stretch of games, Curry has had moments, but I don't think he's at an age where he's going to all of a sudden just consistently take you to the finish line the way he could do even 2 or 3 years ago.
Well, I'm still, from what I've seen of Curry thus far this season in his body of work, I think that he's at least reassured me the way he's closed out Boston and some of these huge games, Dallas come to mind, that he's still got it. He just clearly needs help. And yes, is he Steph Curry of 3 to 5 years ago? No, he's not that guy. Call him a 1A if you can bring in somebody that's a volume scorer. And getting back to Buddy Hield, this is who Buddy Hield is. This gets back to what it is that I was saying, that you just need this season to breathe a little bit before we pass judgment on everybody. This is who Buddy Hield was in Sacramento. This is why Buddy Hield couldn't get into the rotation with Philadelphia a year ago. Is that when he's on, just like all shooters, it's a party. Feed the guy. But when he's not feeling it, this is what happens. Rizzo's waving us to a break. Riz is in the big seat these days.
Yes, he is. Steven Risotto.
14 years of age. He's got a biology class after this show.
Well, take it easy on him. I know you're hard on the Reardon kids, but you got to take it easy on him, okay? He's working his hardest. Ken's back there coaching him up in an Oakland A's hat formerly. And look, we're trying to piece this thing together one play at a time. We're not going to go out and score 100 every night, Dan. But sometimes we can get enough stops on this show, which apparently we need to hit one right now, in order to be a successful group, a successful foursome, a fearsome foursome. And that's where we're going to go to next. I see Gregor Martinez wants to talk about Kuminga last night's game as the Warriors lose to the Timberwolves. Let's try and solve this thing. Let's try and figure this thing out. Over the last week, where have the Warriors gone? Where are they moving? And how much has featuring Jonathan Kuminga either giving you confidence or maybe a bit of, I have no clue what the Warriors are trying to do right now. 888-957-9570. Evan Giddings, Dan DeVell, and Warriors this week. Back after this.
Valvoline Instant Oil Change is your 15-minute drive-through oil change.
Looney had a real good night last night. Gets pushed by Gobert. Pass over to Podziemski. Finds Curry up the screen. Back over to Looney. One dribble. Gets it to Kuminga. Corner three. It's up and popped around and down for Jonathan Kuminga. And the crowd roars its approval as the Warriors lead 3-0.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Well, I think the only three that Kuminga made last night.
First shot of the game.
Really? So first shot goes up and in, and then just crickets rest of the way. See, that's where I do think that part of it is aggression, part of it is mindset, part of it's also just trying to figure out where he fits. Like, that was one thing that after Wednesday night that I was the most curious about and was kind of, I don't know, trying to ask people to just pump the brakes a little bit. Like, when Kuminga plays alone or without one of the two, Draymond or Steph, particularly Curry, well, then he does play differently. But when he's with Steph, and this is where he's going to have to take the next step, I also think that Curry needs to acquiesce a little bit to Kuminga if they indeed want to feature him the way they do. He's going to look different, and there's going to be growing pains, and I think last night was Exhibit A of that.
I've been hearing growing pains with this guy. We're going on 4 years.
No, but now we're in a different place, Dan.
No, I get it.
He's finally in the place that the Wagners or the Barneses or the Cunninghams, other players in his draft class, the Jalen Greens, were at in their rookie or sophomore seasons, which is, okay, you're the guy, you can make mistakes, and you're not going to get yanked.
We're running out of excuses to try and understand why this guy is lacking the consistency and continues to be a tease. At least I am. And I think that a change of venue might be the best thing for both parties at this point. I don't think that he's going to reach full potential with the Golden State Warriors. And I think a lot of it has to do with just sort of the way the team is constructed, that it's still Steph's team and it's two future Hall of Famers. And as long as they're on the floor, that he doesn't have a level of freedom that we saw the other night. And to me, it's just so very clear. And it's not about shooting. When he's got it going, he'll let it fly, whether Steph's on the floor or Draymond's on the floor. And if he's got guys, he's taking off the bounce or he's getting to the rim and dunking on people in transition, he doesn't care. But it's when he misses shots. And every good shooter misses shots. You know, it's a good example of a young player who misses shots and does not give a rip.
LaMelo Ball.
Is Wemby and LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball, perfect example.
He takes one-footed step-back thries and no care in the world.
Yeah, and he has absolutely the free reign to do so by his head coach. And I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a perfect example of being in one system where it's like, do whatever it is that you're going to do because we believe in you at the end of the day. And then you have Jonathan Kuminga in the Warriors system, which is entirely different. And Wembanyama is another guy who's just going to shoot it. And he'll miss 5 in a row, but he knows that it's coming, and San Antonio believes in him, and they know that at some point it's going to balance out. You don't have that. At least Jonathan Kuminga doesn't think that he has that long leash.
Yeah, but the Charlotte Hornets are 6-16, have lost 7 in a row. Like, I think the Warriors are trying to figure out how to, again, feature this player and promote him coinciding with winning basketball games. And that's a hard thing to do. That's why, again, I'm interested to see how it plays out over the rest of the month, particularly against really good opponents like the ones that they've played, the ones they have coming up, because I am with you from this standpoint. Again, I said this in the first segment. I'll say it again. The clock is ticking for Kuminga. One, because they got to make a decision about his contract at the end of the year. Number two, you got the trade deadline in a few months. So you do have to really figure out whether or not you want to move this guy or not. I'm not saying that you're wrong. In fact, you may end up being right. They might choose to trade this player and try and upgrade around the roster and get someone who fits alongside Curry a bit better. But for right now, I do think that these growing pains are something that we're going to have to live through. And I also think the Warriors showed that they have in the past, both last year and this year, when Kuminga's been able to get extended run, that they can win games and not just be the LaMelo Ball Charlotte Hornets that are taking a ton of shots, putting up individual points, and failing to be a 500 basketball team.
Yeah, I listen. It's part of the reason why Jonathan Kuminga has. It's unfair to compare him to LaMelo Ball or anybody in Draymond Green's draft class that is doing well. But 4 years in is 4 years in. At some point, he's got to. He's either part of the system and recognizing that his leash isn't as long and that his run or his time is going to be much more limited on the floor, but you still got to contribute. And it's just, I thought last night's game was really notable. Like we do so many, you do every game, right? You do 82 games, you do pre and post.
Well, they all blend together, but.
And I think last night was one of those games that it was like, okay, is Jonathan Kuminga going to maintain what it is that he did last night? Is this going to be a thing, or is it just one of those, it was an outlier? He had a big game because he had to step up because there was no Steph, or is he going to be that missing piece that everybody, when you're handicapping the Golden State Warriors, we all arrive at one conclusion, and that is who's the number two to Steph. And the best case scenario for everybody that's a Warriors fan is that it's somebody in-house so that you don't have to go out and get that free agent. You don't have to make that trade and give up all those draft picks. And that guy in-house is Jonathan Kuminga. And so after the breakout game, and Evan, I also point out that it wasn't just the 33 points. It's when he scored those points. It was in clutch time, and he drove them home.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, okay, my God, it's time. It's appeared. He's here. Let's go. And then last night happens, and he was so forgettable. The 13 points, and you could see that he checked out of that game. The confidence wasn't there. He wanted nothing to do with taking over a basketball game because he had missed a couple of shots and got into that funk. And I don't know, how it is that you resurrect this guy. I don't want to belabor the point, but you know how I feel about it. I just think that he's too deferential when he sees Steph Curry on the floor. But whatever the reason is, he wasn't the same guy he was the night before against Houston, and that's notable.
Well, and whether he's scoring or whether he's not, again, the biggest issue with this team, in my opinion, is the fact that they cannot consistently put the ball in the hole. And it's when Curry's in, it's been when Curry's out, it's been when Draymond's in, it's been when Draymond's out. The Warriors are 4-1 without Curry this year. They're 1-1 without Draymond. But even in games in which they've won, they struggle to score. Even on Wednesday, they scored 99 points and won the game. 99 points is not that much. And so the Warriors are in a challenging place of trying to do a lot of things at the same time. And I just want to see what fans feel about it. After last night's loss, maybe after Wednesday, they've lost 6 of 7. They're 13-9 basketball team. Let's go to Greg in Martinez once again into last night. Greg, you're on Warriors This Week with Devin Giddings and Dan Devone. How are you?
Good. How you doing? Hey, Evan, I agree with you. Kuminga, he can learn to score with Curry on the floor. He just needs to focus on going to the hole and attacking the paint instead of just settling for threes. He wasn't even playing on defense. He wasn't even in the game against Houston. He was helping with rebounds against Şengün. He didn't show up to help with get rebounds at all. He didn't use his athleticism to engage himself in the game at all last night. But the whole team was disjointed. I mean, they had a bunch of turnovers. I think the points off turnovers for both teams wasn't that much of a difference because there was a lot of dead ball turnovers, but the whole offense was disconjointed. Everybody was in a funk, but he can get his game in any game if he focuses on going to the hole, but he was just settling for threes and just sitting in the corner. He wasn't moving, wasn't cutting, and they didn't run any plays like pick and roll with him and Curry to get people off him or help Steph get open. I mean, the whole offense was really bad last night. What's your thoughts on the game last night in that perspective?
Well, I'm with you. And I was listening on my way home from Sacramento from a beautiful wedding between Jackson and Aaron Watt, listening to the great Dan Devone, who was breaking down what you're talking about, Greg, the 22 turnovers. And actually, this is something you've been on for a long time. It's just, it's who the Warriors are, but maddeningly so. Yeah. They're just loose and careless with the ball. They always have been, and they probably always will be.
Well, that's a sad indictment, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
I mean, because you could be loose and careless with the basketball back in 2016 because that's who you were. You were a team that was, again, you reset the way basketball is played currently in the NBA by shooting threes. But now there's no margin of error for the Golden State Warriors. And so for them to turn the ball over as frequently as they do, for a team that wants to win with defense and slowing it down and using 13 guys, that's not conducive to winning. That's just bad basketball.
You know when they did take care of the ball?
When?
Wednesday. Against Houston.
Oh, that's right. How many turnovers in that game?
I think like 10. Only 10.
And the turnovers were so careless. I mean, part of it's because Minnesota's a good defensive team. At least they've been much better over the last, 8 to 10 games. And they're long and athletic, but a lot of that was just, maybe it was the back-to-back, but really inexplicable. And my man, Trace Jackson Davis, who threw one into the fourth row.
You sure you still want him as your man?
Well, I just got to tell you that, yeah, you're right. I think you hit me up the other day. He's in his own head, too. He and Pajemski ought to they ought to be roommates and turn that thing into a reality show of two confused young men in their sophomore seasons in the NBA.
No, I don't want to kill either of them. They both haven't played very well. But I always thought it was funny. Then I think because Trace Jackson Davis doesn't play as much as Pods does, that there was just this idea that he wasn't suffering from a sophomore slump. But TJD is shooting less than 50% on non-dunks. He hasn't been able to finish around the cup, and he's not an offensive threat unless he's rolling to the rim and catching lobs. And the Warriors really, I would say the only player that last year I feel like consistently played in the pick and roll with him, well, there were two guys, and they're no longer on the team. It was Klay Thompson and Chris Paul.
Yeah.
And so from one
Thompson really unlocked him.
Exactly. But the Warriors haven't really played a lot of PNR with Trace Jackson Davis, and I think that's another reason why he struggled. He's traditional.
And I think his confidence is shot right now. And when you think about Pajemski, and by the way, those two obviously in the same draft class a year ago, good friends, and Pajemski's just a mess. And I know, I'm a big fan of his as well. But now I am too. I'm beginning to lean towards those callers, and I'm sure that, we'll hear from them this afternoon that, why does Pajemski get to play so much? Why does he get so much burn? He's the teacher's pet. Steve Kerr loves him. And I would always defend Pajemski because I'm like, look at all the other things that he does. That's where Steve Kerr puts an emphasis on rebounding, taking the charges, understanding defensive rotations, knowing how to balance the floor, get the ball in the right guy's hands. And Pajemski does all those things. But again, does the end justify the means? Because he cannot score the basketball. And how many of those guys do you want on one team with Pajemski, Looney, GP2, Draymond Green, Trace Jackson Davis, who just sit around and have other functions other than to score the ball? Maybe, it used to be just GP2 and Draymond Green a little bit, but now there's like 5 guys, and that ain't a winning formula. And Pajemski, he's got it. He's just, and if he can't score, then I think his trajectory in this league and as far as his career is concerned, I at least need to readdress, because if he can't score and that's all he's going to give you, if we're looking at this as not just he's in a funk, but this is Pajemski going forward, then we need to reassess, especially if you're Steve Kerr, giving this guy as much time.
Well, The issue is who else are you going to play? Like Pat Spencer?
Well, if healthy, I think you need to see a little more Moody. I do think you need to see a little more Lindy Waters. I thought it was really peculiar in the game against Houston where you're down Steph and you're down DeAnthony Melton and you need scores and Podziemski's not giving you anything, and Podziemski played well against Houston, that Lindy Waters is DNP because he's the one guy on your team that could potentially be a volume scorer if he gets into a rhythm. Now, if he's not feeling it, you can sit him down, but he has the potential of spacing the floor because he's one of your few shooters on the team. And I think it's guys like that that are not going to maybe supplant Podziemski in a starting role or his minutes, but at least reduce those minutes because, young man, you've got to give me something offensively.
But, well, no, I'm 100% with you. To me, it's less about him scoring as whole as just you can't shoot 35% from the field and 22% from three. Like, you can't do that and play 35 minutes a night, which I guess he's only doing when Steph is out. But the other problem is that he, along with, right now, a lot of different Warriors are in slumps. I mean, that's how, over the last 7 games, again, they've only won one of them. They're, I believe, either 28th or 29th in offense. Like, they are putrid. They can't score the ball. That only happens when Podziemski can't put the ball in the hole. Buddy Hield has cratered back down to earth. Someone like Trace Jackson Davis is going through a sophomore slump. Lindy Waters even is not shooting particularly that well. He's only shooting 35% so far from three this season. Moses Moody has regressed from three-point range. I'm Gary Payton II. I do not want to see shoot another three this season. There are a lot of players on this team that are rotational role guys that were helping you at the beginning of the year, and all of a sudden either they've come back down to earth or they're going through individual slumps all at the same time. So again, I think the Warriors can come out of this, but the idea of just playing this guy over that guy because this guy's not performing, I hate to break it to you, outside of your top 2 or 3, no one's scoring.
Buddy Hield's an interesting situation because, well, we call the other two guys slumps. Are they slumps? I mean, I guess I need to see sort of a longer or more detailed resume.
Well, I'm assuming Pods is not going to be a career 22% three-point shooter.
I just haven't seen him play enough basketball for me to arrive at any sort of conclusions as to who he is as a basketball player as far as scoring. It's same with Trace Jackson Davis. I need to see at least a couple of years before I can say, okay, well, listen, man, you need to be shooting a lot better than that. But as far as Buddy Hield is concerned, who's been in the league long enough where we can say, okay, we know who Buddy Hield is. And this, well, Buddy Hield is struggling, but Buddy Hield always struggles at some point in the season. Then he'll catch fire. That's sort of, Buddy Hield is the pure definition of an NBA shooter. This is the way they live. But I think the one thing that I've recognized about Buddy Hield, and so have other teams, when you think about the beginning of the season, 2 things jump out at me. Trace Jackson Davis was so good, and Buddy Hield was the number 2 to Steph Curry and was, that guy that we're talking about, a volume shooter that was scoring the basketball. Buddy Hield does not have the capability of getting his own shot. I mean, he can, but he is clearly a guy who's a catch and shoot and somebody that has to have the feet set and a good look at the front rim. And he can be dangerous. And he's good in transition where defenses are scrambling. But as far as a guy up on his face or running him off the line, he does not have the handle or the ability to get that step back, which most guys have in their bag that are three-point shooters, whether it's Trae Young or whomever. They'll cross you up, step you back, sidestep. And he can do it, but he does not shoot it well. And I think teams recognize that if you get up and in Buddy Hield's face, that you can nullify him. And we're beginning to see that. And it's Buddy Hield, and it's a bunch of guys right now, they can't score. But I think a lot of teams they've passed around the tape. They're like, okay, this is what the Warriors did early on in the season. Let's counter that. And the question now is, do the Warriors have a counter move to sort of get back on track?
888-957-9570 is the number. Warriors this week, Evan Giddings, Dan Devone, every single Saturday, 9 to noon on 95.7 The Game. Let's go down and talk to Austin in San Jose. Wants to get into the roster of the Warriors. Austin, what's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, fellas. Happy Saturday. Yeah, listen, quick comment on the guys that we seem to get too much airtime. I mean, listen, I'm not going to call up and rail on Pods because I think he gets enough. The guy plays hard. not his fault that Kerr is playing him out of position. The guy just has limited talent. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, he's not a shooter. He's not going to be a shooter. He's really a backup point guard on a good team. He shouldn't be a guy that's on the court with a team like the Warriors who's struggling. They need guys with talent, guys that can put the ball in the hole. So I think that's enough said about Podziemski. Kuminga. I don't buy this notion that the reason why he can't seem to get to his height is because of Steph and Dre. I don't buy that at all. They're in fact encouraging this kid to reach his. Why would Curry and Kuminga be in the way of Kuminga? That doesn't make sense to me. So I think that's something that we need to think a little bit about. I think Kuminga probably, as you guys said, is miscast here. But if you're not going to play the kid and allow him to become whoever he is with mistakes, even stars make mistakes, guys. So I don't know why we seem to dwell on what Kuminga doesn't do well. Well, you show me a star that does everything well. What he has to do is be really good at what he does well. That's what he has to do. We don't need to worry about his deficiency. If he's really good, you won't worry so much about his deficiencies. Trust me. So my whole thing with Kuminga is that they should either play him or move him for someone who they can bring in that can start. The Warriors need starters. They need guys that can finish. They need performers. They need pros. Not necessarily a star, but they need a guy that's a pro that knows how to play and they can put into that starting five. So this notion of 12 guys, Dan, I never bought the college 12 guy kumbaya thing. I don't think it works in the NBA. I think it worked for a while because they got wins, but you can't tell me pros are interested in playing that style. Steve Kerr, man, I mean, you guys seem to give him a pass with how he manages a roster. This is the second year in a row where he can't get a starting five. I mean, come on. I mean, this is unacceptable. And the final thing is the other night, man, watching the Warriors, you guys are talking about the old Warriors versus the new Warriors. My God, they had slow-mo out there, Podziemski, GP2. I mean, it was painful to watch. I mean, and Dudley seems to like slow guys. I mean, he's drafting a bunch of guys and bringing in slow-mo and drafting Podziemski. These are some of the slowest guys in the NBA, guys. So final thing, and I'll stop talking. Steph Curry. We need to recognize that Steph Curry is he's diminishing. Those creaky knees are acting up right now. He is not the guy that he was. He's 5 for 15, was it last night? So let's stop acting like he's still the same Curry. He's not. They better find a number 1A soon, or this is a play-in team, man. That's what I got. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Austin. A lot of good points there. A lot of good things to unpack. Where do you want to start? I mean, to me, I think the last part I kind of agree with. If the Warriors are going to make a trade, ideally it's for a player that is at an equal or higher level than Curry, but I don't know who is actually out there that's attainable.
Curry or Kuminga?
No, Curry.
Curry.
Like, Curry's 36 years old. Curry's being asked to carry a roster essentially, or has been until they decided to start featuring Kuminga, by himself, offensively. He's the one. Look around the rest of the league. There's no other team that is asking what the Warriors are asking of Steph Curry at his age.
Denver, maybe?
At his age.
Oh, at his age.
Jokic is in his prime.
Yeah.
He's coming off of 3 of 4 MVPs. He might win another one this year. There are players that are being asked to do what Curry has, but not at age 36 with double knee tendonitis.
That sounds terrible.
I'm just saying, like,
double knee tendonitis
or bilateral, whatever, bilateral femoral pain, whatever medical term you want to use. The Warriors are asking an aging man to carry this roster in a way that I don't think any other player, maybe in the history of basketball, for his size, his position, and his, to the caller's point, diminished ability is being asked to do.
Well, I hate to break it to everybody, but that player doesn't exist. There's nobody out there that you can trade for that's available.
I agree.
That is going to be that guy. So, therein lies the sort of Warrior conundrum, if you will. And just really quick, Austin, I guess, Austin and I love to disagree just about every Saturday, but you're not going to convince me that, and he's spot on a lot of his stuff, that Jonathan Kuminga, listen, it doesn't matter how Jonathan Kuminga scores the basketball, just score the damn thing and be consistent about it. And whether it's your three, you're feeling it, or getting to the rim, that's what scorers do. They'll put it on the deck some nights, or they're feeling it from the outside. It varies, but you're not going to convince me that being within the structure of the Warriors, just imagine if they didn't draft Weissman and they draft LaMelo Ball. Do you think LaMelo Ball has the rookie season he had with Charlotte if he's playing alongside Steph Curry? I'll answer that for you. No way in hell.
No, but he's got a ring. The thing that, again, we can get into this on the other side. I do think that there is a shift that is happening in Golden State. And my biggest question is, can they win games while they figure out how this shift impacts both their team, their season, and their future? 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone back after this on Warriors This Week.
This message comes from Viking, committed to exploring the world in comfort. Journey through the heart of you.
Down the lane, knocked away by Podziemski from behind. Bad pass, Curry. Podziemski runs it down. Protects it from Conley to Waters. The three. Got it! Podziemski made that play by hustling down the pass and turned it into 3 points. Timeout, Minnesota.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Well, while we helped Dan Devone out here in just a minute, I think that we have some
Always
of the
scary when Ken comes into the studio and beelines it right for me.
Why? Well, he's not that intimidating. Look at him. He's got a cute little beard you can just grab onto, and he's got a child's face.
I can't figure him out.
Underneath that Persian rug.
A's hat.
I got to teach you how to work your camera, Dan.
No, that'll never happen. Dolphins fan.
That
A's
I do
hat.
believe. Dolphins fan,
A's.
Knicks fan.
Yeah,
what else? You like the Seattle Kraken, or
No, I like the Bruins.
are you a crackhead? Apparently that's what they call themselves.
Oh, really?
Crackheads.
It's a great name, the Kraken. It's a sea monster.
I'm aware of what it is. Marshawn Lynch is part of
Meanwhile, the Seahawks have the only fictional mascot in the NFL. There's no such thing as a Seahawk. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Really?
No.
Well, now you got me thinking. All right, vamp for a minute. I'm going to come up with one.
What?
Dude,
I spit gospel. What are you going to do? Refute me?
You spit gospel. First of all, I teach you something every single weekend. You might teach me 3 things, but I teach you something every single weekend, whether you know it or not. You pick it up. I'm about to teach you something right now because the 415 in the Comcast Business Text line brings up, I think, exactly what we're talking about. We left off the last segment discussing what the Warriors are trying to go through, what they're asking Curry to do. 415, this is from Greg in San Francisco. LeBron James, ? Harden, ? Those guys are around Curry's age and play heavy minutes. Okay, well, we'll also throw Kevin Durant in there. He's Curry's age. He plays heavy minutes. Those guys are forwards, 6'6" and above, and not small in stature. Their games are also predicated on being on the ball. Curry can play on the ball, but he also plays off of it. Curry's playing style is completely different from those 3 guys that I just named. And so those guys, yes, can pound the rock and play slow and use their physicality in a way that Curry has never been able to do in his entire career. Those players are also not dealing with tendonitis currently. Now, Durant's been out, ankle injuries. LeBron James apparently can't hit the broadside of a barn. He's shooting worse than Pods the last 10 games, apparently. Yeah, and then James Harden's totally different.
Yeah, well, I agree with all of that. Not to mention that, well, James Harden plays on the ball, and he plays the point, and they have similar positions, but yeah, you're right. James Harden's a different sort of player, and he's 3 inches bigger. But what James Harden and LeBron James do that Steph Curry doesn't do is that they don't play. They don't play defense. They take time off while they're in a game. They load management throughout the course of a game. Watch LeBron James play basketball these days. For the first 2 quarters, he picks his spots when it is that he wants to run down the floor so that he has, quote unquote, the energy to play the 4th quarter. And James Harden never plays with a level of intensity like that of a Steve Kerr. His entire career is about load managing until I get the ball and I'm open and I'll hit a 3. So when you think about comparing Steph Curry to those 2 players in particular, Steph Curry plays ball. Steph Curry may not be the best defender, but he works and he gives a damn. James Harden is resting throughout the entire course of a game, especially on the defensive end, and the same can be true at this age for LeBron James. And you're right, Kevin Durant, when you're 6'11", 7 feet, depending on who it is that you talk to, you can't compare. As I like to say, that's apples and bowling balls to Steph Curry and the energy that he has to exhibit throughout the course of a day and a game as opposed to someone like that of a Kevin Durant. But please, miss me with James Harden, who is still playing at this age, and LeBron James, 2 guys who take more time off through the course of while playing in a game than anybody else in the NBA.
Well, and Steve, if we could put, I don't know what board you have in front of you, but do we have the post-game sound from last night? From the Timberwolves' loss. Kerr, Draymond, do you have it ready Do you have it ready?
We have all of it. You want to hear Draymond first?
Yes, I would like to hear Draymond Green, because what we're getting at is again, the Warriors asking Curry to do something that other teams don't, which is play heavy minutes, be the primary offensive player, doing it at an advanced age without a relative running mate. Well, I think the Warriors last night before the game, with their choice to start Kuminga instead of Draymond, are trying to expedite the process of elevating a running mate for Curry. And here's how Draymond took it.
I felt great physically. Yeah, definitely an adjustment. Just it's a group of a bunch of different guys. So it's an adjustment. Have to figure it out, but I'm up for it.
Sounds like you were part of the decision-making process to, I guess, go to this. What's the rationale behind it?
Coach just called and asked me. He said it's something he was thinking about. And he wanted to know if I was okay with it. Of course I'm okay with it. I have been one of JK's biggest fans since he's been here. And so if he has an opportunity to start, you can't be hypocritical. And they're like, yo, we want him to start, but it'll be for you. And you can't be like, it's not for me. Like, that don't work. Like, I'm a fan of his. I want to see him do well. So if his opportunity goes through me, then it is what it is. That's his opportunity, and he earned the opportunity. So that's kind of how I view it. So that was kind of my rationale. He played extremely well last night. You want to give that another look, or 2 or 3 or 4, or however long. If it works, then you continue with it. And so, that's kind of my rationale for me. I am a product of my vet being willing to take a back seat for me. So you got to give back what came to you. That's what this is about.
I mean, you termed it as a backseat. I mean, do you view that as it?
Yeah, so that was Draymond Green after the game talking about the decision. I hear a couple things. Number one, he's reluctant towards taking a back seat unless it works. And that's where there is somewhat of a clock on this entire experiment that the Warriors are working with. If you're going to feature and promote and lean all the way in on Jonathan Kuminga being the center or one of the focal points of this offense, number one, you have to give it time. Number two, you have to be okay with games like last night, because I don't know if it's fair to expect a player of his age or his capability right now, Dan, to just all of a sudden become and flourish into a 25 to 30 point per game scorer. Like, he's going to have games like he did on Wednesday, and he's going to have games like he did last night. But there has to be more of the Wednesdays if someone like Draymond Green is going to be okay with not starting.
Yeah, I have to disagree with you. I think that the idea that the Golden State Warriors have to be patient with Jonathan Kuminga and that he's still growing and that this is a roller coaster, at some point you got to cut bait, because he's 22 now. We're still going to be doing this when he's 25, 26. Jonathan Kuminga has had, I get it, it was a process of elimination a year ago, but he got an opportunity to start and play, and that's the one thing that he wanted, right? I mean, he complained publicly, or his minions did, that JK needs more time, Steve Kerr, and it was an issue we all talked about. And, as it happened, you have Draymond Green, who is lost for nearly a month, and it's an opportunity for JK to play, and he played well. But he hasn't built on that. And now I get it. It's not because Draymond Green has been suspended, but it's because he's been elevated. I don't really care how he got into the starting lineup or how he's getting consistent minutes. All I care about is the bottom line. And the bottom line is, in year 4, I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of you giving me 33 and then 13 the next night. And maybe he'll play well against Minnesota, then disappear for a week. At what point does he turn the corner and be a consistent scorer? And if it's not going to happen for the Warriors, whether you want to believe me that it has something to do because of being deferential to Steph Curry and Draymond Green, whatever the reason is, it's either time to not give him an extension, trade him, or move off on this project because it's not happening here with the Golden State Warriors.
But I think that's the whole point, is that's why it's happening now, is because it is time to put up or shut up. You got 2 months. I think that's what they're saying. Like, you are going to be given, the Warriors are going to basically make Kuminga what he wants to be for a couple of weeks, couple of months, however long it takes for them to evaluate and figure out what exactly this player is. And that might be unfair because other players in his class have had extended periods of time. But this is what you have. This is, in many ways, this is Kuminga's moment. And so if he's not good enough, well, then, yeah, you go trade him. And so I'm not asking you to be patient. What I'm asking you to, patience in a couple of weeks is not patience over a couple of years. The Warriors have to make a choice. And so they're doing this now to figure out what path they're going to go down with this player. So I don't look at it as being they've been patient for the last 3 or 4 years. I think that's the patience. Right now, they benched a cornerstone player of their franchise to move this kid into the starting lineup to better serve him. This is the first time I have ever seen the Warriors make Jonathan Kuminga a primary focus, or one of them. It's always been him fitting around Curry or around Draymond or around Clay or around Poole or whoever else has been on this team. This is the first time in his career that he has essentially been given the keys. And so you're right that we don't have a lot of time, but this is when he's got to prove it.
You don't think he was given the keys last year?
No, I don't. Because Wiggins missed time, Draymond missed time.
But regardless of how he arrived at playing time, he was given the keys. I mean, they still needed a number two, and it's an opportunity regardless of how he got a chance to play. To me, there was every opportunity for him to be that guy.
Well, and he scored 17 points a game as a starter and shot over 50% from the field. He had 10 straight games in which he scored 20 points.
Yet it wasn't good enough for him to start or be relied upon as being the guy going into this season, which sort of in a nutshell is what it is that I'm talking about. It's Jonathan Kuminga.
But then how could you say he was given the keys if he was all of a sudden moved back to his role before? Like that. That's why I don't think that they truly leaned into him last year. They more so just plug and played him when guys were out or injured.
Well, a lot of it had to do with his inconsistency.
Yeah.
Because if he was that guy, you think the Warriors, who even last year were desperate for a second scorer, because Klay Thompson would disappear at times, they needed consistent scoring. And if Draymond had been that guy, or excuse me, if JK had been that guy, he would have gotten his opportunity. It's just, this is who Jonathan Kuminga is. And then he can be really good. And then he can, he can take a step in the wrong direction. And I think he gets frustrating to a certain degree.
Well, he's frustrating. I mean, well, yeah, he's a young guy. But the other part of it is you do have to basically feature him, because the next 2 months are going to be a showcase for Jonathan Kuminga. Either they're a showcase for the Warriors to pay him whatever he believes he's worth or the market dictates that he is, or it's a showcase for another team because they trade him. But they've come to the conclusion that they can't wait any longer and that they need his skill set. They need him to score. This team cannot score more than 100 points. And there are very few players, because of the way that the roster is constructed, that can go and help you in that endeavor. And Kuminga happens to be one of them. And I think he's the player that has the biggest leap possible to make. I'm not saying he's going to or he will, but I guess I would ask, if Curry's taken a step back offensively, Wiggins is playing well, but even during 2022, which many people would identify as his best season, he was about 17.5 points per game, which is where he's at now. He's not going to all of a sudden transform back into the 20-point per game scorer he was in Minnesota. Where else are you going to find offense from?
Jonathan Kuminga.
I think that's why they're doing this. Is because
and I think Steve Kerr said as much. He's like, we're going to maximize. When he used the word maximize last night, I think it's exactly what it is that you're talking about. Let's just see what it is that he's going to do. It's a bit reactionary, though, is it not? He had to score the 33 points for you to maximize Jonathan Kuminga. I mean, I think there's a lot of just either he's a guy that you just showcase, roll him out there, and maximize him a month ago, 2 months ago. Why is it that he had to score 33 before you give him an opportunity to be potentially, the player that they, they
because they've been losing
need.
basketball games. That's the reason why.
But I think that there's somebody out there that sees value in Jonathan Kuminga. That I have no doubt about. I think there's a team out there. So really what this gets back to is when you pick up the phone, which Dunleavy I think has done before, and when he does it again in a couple of months, and he's on the horn, and he's talking to other teams. This just simply comes down to what is it that you're willing to give up for Jonathan Kuminga or a package involving Jonathan Kuminga. That's when you really get down to whether or not you're going to pull the trigger. And it's who's going to replace Jonathan Kuminga. But I do think to that point that there is going to be value, because I do think there's a lot of teams that see this guy as being a budding star. And maybe are sort of, along the lines of how I see it, it's just not going to happen with Golden State. But I could see a GM or a coach or a team saying, you know what, if he came here, it'd be a good fit. Like, I think if Jonathan Kuminga was with our team and fill in whoever that team might be, we could develop this guy into a perennial all-star. I do think that there's a lot of people that believe that they can unlock this guy. And then again, it just becomes, if you value Jonathan Kuminga, what is it that you're willing to give up in return?
Well, and also what you're willing to pay him. I mean, that's...
Well, if you value him, then you're going to give him the 30 to 35 mil per.
But he wants more than that, evidently. Like the gap was 30 to 35, but he might decide that the price of the bricks going up. Like, what you're trading for is a player that you have to sign because he's a restricted free agent. I think it's also plausible that this offseason the Warriors decide that they want to sign and trade him and basically have another team dictate what they want to pay him. But right now, Kuminga is, $8-9 million. He might be the centerpiece of the deal, but if you want to go out and acquire a big name player, you're going to have to attach other big salary. I mean, it's not like the Warriors have a ton of players right now making large money. So if
Andrew Wiggins would once again have to resurface. Well,
yeah, but and I'm not opposed to that, but are you really going to trade both of your wings?
It all depends again on what it is I'm getting in return.
I think it's a lot. To me, I think the Warriors are stuck a little bit because of some of the decisions they made this offseason.
Yeah.
One of which hard capped them at the first apron, and you don't get anything from that player because Melton is now missing the season with an ACL. But they're in a tough spot as far as going out and making a big move. Like this idea that, and Shams Charania has said the other day that they want to acquire a star. How? Like, how? A star makes between $40 and $55 million.
Well, Wiggins has got to be part of that deal. If you stay on this trajectory where a month or 2 months from now we're doing this show and the Warriors are a sub-500 basketball team, it makes those decisions a lot easier.
But why would you go trade for a star if you're a sub-500 basketball team?
Well, because you're looking to resurrect things.
Yeah, but to me, that's like trying to plug a hole into a boat when you got 6 leaks. Like, to me, you go and acquire a star if you're a star away from contending. I don't think the Warriors are all of a sudden one star. I mean, maybe there's multiple players out there they could go get. I don't see the way that I think the Warriors are trying to figure out if they can solve this thing internally before going out and shipping off pieces.
Yeah, but if they stay on this slide and this is a sub-500 basketball team, do they just stay with the status quo and just say, okay, we'll just chalk this up to a losing season?
Well, you're assuming that they're going to continue to lose 6 of 7.
No, I'm just saying the way they have played over the last, we're going on nearly a month now. If this is the way the Warriors, if this is the road they're headed down, where they sort of, exceeded expectations and were playing beyond their skis in the first month of the season, that this is more of sort of who they are, then when it comes to the trade deadline, are you saying if you don't want to go out and make a drastic change to try and turn things around, that we're good with sort of who we are, and that is a losing team? Is that something that Joe Lacob, Dunleavy, and Steve Kerr, are they playing for the future? That, do they get in line for Mr. Flag, or is it this is a team that's looking to build through the draft? I mean, what's the direction if this team continues to lose, if you're not going to go out and get a star at the trade deadline?
If you're a sub 500 basketball team and you go and acquire a star, you're shipping off your future, because you're probably including young players. You're also including draft picks. I mean, to me, the worst decision to make would be to be a sub 500 basketball team and try and go acquire a star. I mean, I think that's why you didn't want to do it this summer with Paul George and Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah, no, I'm not a proponent of it. I'm just saying, what are the options then? So then if we're not getting that star and you're a losing team, then you just ride this out with Kuminga and an underwhelming, Kuminga and Wiggins and a team that's just simply not very good.
Well, I think the question they have to ask themselves is, are they closer to the team that started 12-3 or the team that's lost 6 of their last 7? Because they're probably somewhere in the middle, but is that good enough? If they're right now a 6 seed at the end of the season, then they might be a star player away from having some action. I also think that Curry is a big part of this too, because if Curry is still the guy that can be the closer and the best player in a playoff series, and you believe that, well, then maybe you owe it to him to try and go get a big boy. But if he's the player that's dealing with achy knees and can't play back-to-backs and is averaging 22 points a game or 23 points a game, which he currently is, then acquiring a star might not be the best way to go. I think in many ways the rest of this season does depend on the health of Curry and Draymond. And I think that's another part of why they decided to move Draymond to the bench, is to try and keep him more fresh, because he's got this calf injury that, according to him, he's apparently worried about. They have to juggle so many balls right now. It's like they have to juggle the load management of their aging stars. They have to juggle the ideal emergence of another promising player in Kuminga, and they also have to juggle this idea of whether they want to still play 12 at a time, because you can't really help everybody, or you can't help one individual if you're trying to play 12.
Yeah, but I don't think that any of this should surprise anybody, especially the Golden State Warriors. You can't tell me that they couldn't anticipate that Steph Curry at some point, after all the basketball that he's played, including the Olympics and that remarkable show that he put on, that the Warriors couldn't foresee all of this.
It was 2 games, though.
But he's 37 years of age. You mean to tell me you don't think that the Warriors at some point it danced in their head that, he may go down with an injury, or there's going to be a time where he's going to miss some games? And 37 years of age is 37 years of age. So I think the idea that suddenly he has crickety knees is not out of left field for the Warriors. Not if they're the sort of, intelligent sort of executive branch that we think they are. Like, you can anticipate that Steph Curry was going to slow a bit. He's shown signs over the last couple of years. And then the idea that this roster going into the season, that you were going to play 12 guys, you knew that was going to be problematic at some point. I don't think any of this should be a surprise to the Golden State Warriors, that, all of a sudden Steph Curry is playing like a 37-year-old, and, we have a roster that's of 12 or 13 guys. How is that sustainable? Those have been questions right from the jump.
Well, but again, and we can continue this conversation on the other side, these things weren't problematic when you were 12-3 and you beat in a single week Boston, Oklahoma City, and forget who is the other top dog. Maybe it was Dallas. Like, they showed that they could beat good teams. They've had a 4-1 road trip against some of the elites in basketball. So I hear what you're saying, and these are all things that they got to consider. But to me, the start of the season,
was a surprise, though, when you admit. I mean,
well, it was a surprise, but you win 12 of 15 games. That's not exactly easy to do.
Yeah, I guess going into the season, the Warriors should have been able to anticipate a lot of this.
All right, 888-957-9570 is the number. Scott in Redwood City, I see you. Priest in Palo Alto, I see you. We'll take your calls on the other side on Warriors this week. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings back after this on 95.7 The Game.
Valvoline Instant Oil Change is your 15-minute drive-through oil change. Visit their expert technicians to check fluids, tire pressure, windshield wipers, batteries, and more. Safe holiday travel starts at Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Locations and coupons at BayAreaOilChange.com. BayAreaOilChange.com.
Television sales on Black Friday set new records as millions of Americans snapped up the hot deals. But a lot of people were out of town or too busy to take advantage of the special pricing. So, how about a redo? Right now, you've got a second chance to save big on many of the top-rated Samsung, LG, and Sony TVs. Where? At Video Only, where the smart shoppers go. So, don't miss out. Check out Video Only now, or
you'll be sorry. Xfinity here. How can we help?
Hi, my entire family's obsessed with all things Wicked, but my kids can't stop watching the trailer, and now they're having a Wicked-themed sleepover. Do you think our internet can handle all of the streaming and memeing going on?
Well, we've engineered our Xfinity gateways to handle hundreds of devices at once, so they can all stay magically connected.
Wow. Are you a wizard?
I wish. No, just someone that won't let a bad connection burst your internet bubble.
Now through December 22nd, get thrillifyingly fast Xfinity Gigabit Internet for $25 a month for 12 months when you add unlimited mobile. And get Peacock Premium, a $7.99 a month value included at no extra cost. Or lock in your internet price for 2 years for just $5 more a month with a 1-year contract. Early termination fee applies. Go to Xfinity.com to learn more and keep the magic going from your screen to the big screen. And see Wicked in theaters now. Restrictions apply. Requires PayPal, Split, and auto pay bank account. Equipment, taxes, and fees extra. Gig Wi-Fi requires Xfinity Gateway. Xfinity Mobile requires Xfinity Internet. After promo, regular internet rates apply. Actual speeds vary.
Lovebirds, you're in for a treat. With your holiday proposal just around the corner, Shane Company is here to help you create your dream engagement ring. This is your moment. Let's make it magical. Through 4 generations as a family business, we've helped tons of couples find a beautiful engagement ring for a price that works with their budget. We've always sourced diamonds directly, cut out the middleman, and passed the savings on to you. At Shane Company, we have the widest selection of ring settings and center stones, in stock and ready to compare side by side. It's so easy. Choose a look that brings your vision to life. From classic styles to modern designs, we have them all. Then pick out a natural or lab-grown diamond, a sapphire in your favorite color, or a vibrant gemstone like ruby or amethyst. With our everyday competitive prices and free lifetime warranty, your forever after is safe with us. Visit shaneco.com and come see us in store. We've got your dream ring and fine jewelry gifts for everyone on your list. Shane Company, your friend and jeweler.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
Welcome to AutoZone. What are you working on today? Thinking about gas mileage. You know, changing your oil with a full synthetic oil like Pennzoil Platinum can help your engine get more miles. Right now, you can get 5 quarts with an STP Extended Life Oil Filter for only $35.99. Get started on your next job today with the parts you need when you need them at AutoZone or AutoZone.com.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
Restrictions apply.
Love your future at the Peralta Colleges. We have 4 convenient East Bay locations: Berkeley City College, College of Alameda, Laney College, and Merritt College. Study anytime, anywhere with our online classes. Get a certificate with our free non-credit courses. Don't wait. A new life is just a click away. Sign up today at peralta.edu and love your future at the Peralta Colleges.
Hey, Mario Lopez here, and I've got the ultimate pickleball gift package. Celebrity Pickleball Bash is the great sport of pickleball with an unparalleled music and entertainment experience. We're talking celebrities, pro athletes, pickleball champs, all coming together for 2 days of fun, competition, and entertainment. Now, for a limited time only, receive a free drink and fireside chat with a professional pickleball player for the purchase of a ticket. Please join me in San Francisco, February 15th and 16th at the iconic Warfield Theater. Head to CelebrityPickleballBash.com and take advantage of this offer before it's gone.
Hey everyone, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call.
If you're paying too much for wireless service, you don't have to keep having that nightmare. Consumer Cellular has the same fast, reliable coverage as the leading carriers for less. And for a limited time, new customers receive their second month free when they sign up and use promo code SECONDFREE by January 26th. So why keep spending more than you have to? Seriously, wake up and call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Taxes, fees, and other third-party charges will apply. See website for additional details.
This is the story of the one who, as a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, knows that vintage charm historically needs constant attention. Which is why, when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them. The right tools and supplies are never far away. So the one can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Here's another great reason to use the United States Postal Service this season. Your boxes are wrapped and the gifts are in. Our employees are ready. Let the holiday ride begin. Let's start with the price. It's easy to manage when you ship with the reliable USPS Ground Advantage. In just a few days, it's sure to arrive. We're working nonstop to keep the spirit alive. USPS Ground Advantage, the affordable and reliable shipping solution for the holidays. Visit USPS.com/advantage.
Randall steps around Kyle Anderson. Finger roll won't go. Payton with a rebound in traffic. Lost the ball. Curry picked it up far sideline. With DiVincenzo on his back. Curry snaps off a pass. Payton goes up left-handed. Good! And a foul!
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
All right, halfway home. Starting to get a little
the silver lining,
testy.
Silver lining in all of this?
The playbook?
That was with
Jennifer Lawrence.
Jennifer Lawrence. Oh, yeah. Sports Talk Radio? Yeah, good show.
I know.
No, is it the Lakers suck? So we can take solace in that.
See, all right, this is you and I were both on this. I think you know how to read head coaches, I think, a lot better than I do. I just didn't believe that a podcaster could all of a sudden step into. I know J.J. Redick is a former player. I think he's smart basketball mind, but I didn't see it from the jump, and that's where I struggled, Dan. It's like I understand why the Lakers are coming back down to earth. If you look at their win streak when they were putting together W's, they didn't beat any good teams, or they beat teams that were riddled by injury. I struggle with the Warriors because I do think that winning 12 out of 15, even into the beginning of the season, that's a significant enough a period to lead me to believe that the Warriors can summon that level of basketball in the future. Also, what the hell is going on with you and Ken?
He misses me. So
Well,
he comes in he makes excuses to come up and sidle next to me.
Well, I'm going to get him a cot the way that he's been over there.
Well, I told you because oh, that's so funny. He just put the Zoom thing up, and after chastising me because I would always click out of Zoom. I know people at home have no idea what it is I'm talking about, but
they
I'm
do.
I'm technically
they do if they're
challenged.
watching on YouTube because your face just left.
Listen, man. I'll admit I am technically challenged. I don't like any of this.
But you help build apps.
I don't. I get investors. And then we hire this team from Pakistan. They build the damn thing. You kidding me?
So your job is just to kind of schmooze and booze all the big wigs and all the techies, bring people together.
Yeah, no, I got to find people
You're a leader
that want to invest. And
kind of.
It's sort of, it's fascinating, sort of like having to learn. I mean, you have to have some sort of an idea of how all this thing comes together if you have a startup involving an app, especially a sports tech app.
So you kind of learned by doing.
But I don't do any of that. Like, that's not even in my department. But you do when you sit down. At some point, there's some crossover where you have to sort of have, like when I was involved with a startup that was dealing with concussions, I had to learn all about concussions. And I had to learn and break down CTE, and I had to understand about the water tank and all of these things that happen, and deal with neurologists and interview these sort of people. So
that's why you struggle with Tua.
Oh God, let's not go there, please.
Yeah. I don't want to bring Kane back in here, and this time he actually might be mad at you. All right, 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings, Dan DeVoe, and Warriors this week, 95.7 The Game, every single Saturday from 9 to noon. Let's go to Scott in Redwood City. He's been hanging on patiently. Scott, how's your Saturday morning? What's going on?
Hey, guys. Doing great. Love your show. Listen every Saturday morning at the gym, and you guys are on a roll. But wanted to say a couple of things. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Steve Kerr has forgotten more about basketball than I'll ever know. But I don't understand this yo-yoing of Steph Curry back and forth. 3 minutes in, 3 minutes out, 6 minutes in, 6 minutes out. I want to suggest something radical. And at some point in time, we all know that Curry's going to come off the bench. And I would suggest that it start now. And if you bring in Curry and Draymond Green off the bench for the last 6 minutes of every quarter, that means, number one, they'll be finishing the game together. It also means that it'll limit their time to about 24 minutes a game. And it also means that they'll mostly be playing against bench guys. I think that it's got a chance of, especially if anybody's going to do this, it would be Steph Curry if it helps the team. So just want to get your thoughts.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Scott. Look, I don't think that it's out of the question that by the end of his career, someone like Curry comes off the bench. But really, when I hear that suggestion, it makes me think, Dan, that and the Warriors had this problem last year. It's that they don't have starters. They don't have enough starting lineup caliber players right now that can start and close. Like, let's take the game against Denver that a lot of people felt like they blew a couple games ago, right? Denver knows exactly who's in their starting and finishing five. Jamal Murray, Christian Brown, it's Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. Those guys have played together. Those guys have won together. That's 4 out of the 5 were on the floor when they won the championship. A lot of teams have figured out who their starting and finishing fives are. The Warriors have not to this point this season.
I would agree with that, but I would say that was much more plausible early on in the season. Again, it's just the tale of who they were in the first month of the season to where they're at right now. And when Buddy Hield was scoring the basketball, you can entertain things like that. Although I would push back on the caller if it's about load management or making sure that you're not overusing Steph Curry. He's limited to well under 30 minutes a game this year. So, and he closes games regardless. The only problem with that, if he doesn't start, you could be down by 25 points, especially the way the team is playing these days. But, getting back to the Warriors in the beginning of the season, you could, I think, entertain that. And, and Steph, remember, there were games where Steph Curry wasn't the leading scorer and Steph Curry wasn't even very good because Buddy Hield was just going off and the Warriors had other options. But the one question that we would banter about is this sustainable? As much as people didn't want to hear about it, is this something that can last throughout the entire season? And as we're finding out, the answer to that, unfortunately, is no.
No, I think not. Sorry about that. No, I think, look, the Warriors are trying to throw stuff at the wall right now and figuring out if it sticks. Again, we talked about this in the last segment. I think the reason why Kuminga is being elevated into the starting lineup is as much about trying to figure out what they have in this kid before they have to either decide to pay him or trade him. Or I guess they could potentially let him walk. I don't think that that'll happen. But it's also because they're trying to figure out how to get out of this slump. You have no reason to adjust things when you're winning. When you're losing, everything's on the table. And I think that's also how you get the buy-in of someone like Draymond Green, where you kind of sell them on, look, this kid's next up, and our season in many ways is going to be dictated on how good he can be. And it's unfair to ask him to grow up in 2 months, but that's the point we've kind of gotten to. With Curry's minutes, I also think they've experimented. When Scott was throwing out the 3 minutes here, 4 minutes there, if originally it's Curry plays, back in the day, he plays the full first quarter, plays the first 12 minutes, eventually ends up around 33 or 34 minutes per game. This year he's been under 20 or under 30. They tried, I think, against Denver to play him 4 and 4 at the beginning and end of quarters. I think they might mess around with his minutes again because you just kind of have to. But I am worried that the Warriors are more focused on load managing Curry and Draymond because those are and have been your two best players. And if you're concerned about their health and how much they're being used, well, then you're going to run into problems unless the rest of those rotation guys, which were hitting shots and scoring and playing defense for the first 15 games, if those guys don't play to that level, it's not going to work.
I guess if you were to sit back and sort of look at the Warriors and where they're at right now and sort of the difficulties that they've dealt with over the last couple of weeks and the struggles that they've had, really at the beginning of the year, should any of us be surprised? And as far as Steve Kerr groping to find a starting lineup, look at who it is that he's dealing with. I mean, Kyle Anderson, good player, but not a star. Buddy Hield, we've talked about him. Trace Jackson Davis, Jonathan Kuminga, Kevon Looney. Go right on down the list. The Moses Moody's, the Gary Paytons of the world, the Brandon Pajemskis. These are Pat Spencer. What are we doing here? Like, when you're thinking about the team you took on last night, you could just clearly see, just visually, that one team was long and athletic and proven with Naz Reid and Ant-Man and Gobert and stars. Same holds true when you play OKC or any of these other teams. And the Golden State Warriors are trying to cobble together something here that's just well short of pound for pound being able to match up with other stars that teams have, and the Warriors just simply don't. At the end of the day, you're trying to make, the old lemonade out of a bunch of lemons. Something like that.
Well, I think you can make lemonade out of lemons.
Well, you know where I wanted to go with that, but it was,
Well, isn't it? It's something like, I don't know. You can't make lemonade if you don't have lemons or something like that. I don't know. I think what we're trying to get at, somehow, some way, help us, 888-957-9570. Like freaking...
You're trying to make lemonade out of lemons. Did I just say that?
Yes, you did. Well, they are. Lemons might stink right now. They're not ripe. But the Warriors have a talent-deficient roster. I think that's kind of what we're getting at.
You can only dress it up for so long and fool people. At some point, at the end of the day, you are who you are.
Yeah, you can put lipstick on a pig. It's, no, like, if I'm wearing nice clothes, which I happen to be because I got to go out later, I can only look so good. If I'm ugly, then putting a tuxedo on... Thank you. Well, I don't know if that's really a drop. If I'm ugly, putting a tuxedo on me is not really going to help that much. I might look better than I am, when I'm in a wife beater and some sweatpants and I haven't shaved in 3 weeks. But if I'm trimmed up, I can only, you know what I'm saying? I can only get to a certain level of a visual aesthetic, Dan, as someone who's been on television for 20 years. Some people got a face for radio.
Yeah, you just took this analogy and got very personal about your looks there.
Well, I'm confident who I am.
Yeah, you're a good-looking guy. I think you dress it up, you could be a top 2 seed.
Thank you, Dan. All right, let's go out to the callers. Get us back on track. If you got some quote about lemons, we'll take that too. 888-957-9570 is the number. Let's go to Priest in Palo Alto. Wants to talk about Kuminga. Priest, how are you? Long time no talk.
Let it go, Priest.
Yeah, pretty good. How you doing, man? Thanks for taking my call. Listen, I put all this at the feet of the head coach. This is an absolute act of desperation. He's been yo-yoing and pushing this kid and doghousing him for 2 years, playing Anthony Lamb over him, almost making a joke out of the situation. Now, he's got nowhere to turn. So he's turning to him and saying, we need you to do this in a couple of months. We need you to prove yourself right now because I need you. We've been talking about this for 2 years, that this is going to be the eventuality. Steph Curry was not going to be able to do this into his 40s. It was obvious after the 22, when they won the championship, it was time to make a transition. They initially, in that year after that, they were going to lean into the young guys and get them ready. He abandoned ship the first 10 games because it was 3-7. And this is what he does. He jumps from one thing to another, trying to solve problems that he created. And so now you got this young kid who's an obvious talent, and he's messed around with him and messed around. Should have did this last year. Now he's in a pickle, so he's putting him on the spot, and having him do something that he should have did over the last year and a half. Okay, so Kuminga, I think, will show that he's capable of carrying this. But at the same time, this is Steve Kerr's bed. He made it. He needs to lie in it because it's a house of cards. Steph's knees are, they're going to downplay that as much as they can. But Steph shouldn't be playing more than 25 minutes a game. And he should be closing, not trying to carry the team. But they don't have a team to carry them. They got a young kid. They got the two wings. They got a guard, a shooter who's streaky as all get out. It was a house of cards to begin with. Now Draymond is back. See, this is what happens when you kick the can down the road and keep kicking the can down. And eventually, you're going to have to pay. You might not pay now. You might pay later. But you're going to have to pay, and that's what's happening.
Thanks, Priest.
Good call.
Yeah, I think so. You know, if you're going to put it at someone's doorstep, yes, the head coach, like anytime players don't develop, you know, I think people look at them. You know, I think also some of this is on the front office, you know, selling us this bill of goods that we haven't really seen. He's right, though. It is a desperate act. And I think it's also one that the Warriors have been hoping that Kuminga would eventually get to. But you start losing games, and you don't have anywhere else to turn to. I don't know about the previous years, Bill. That's where I guess I would be different from Priest, is that it's really difficult to prioritize a young player when you have, at times, 3 different Hall of Famers on your roster. You know, like I think Klay Thompson, he was actually 4 Hall of Famers last year because Chris Paul was also there, though he wasn't as much in the starting lineup. It was harder to make him a priority over those guys. It's just the pecking order of things. I know he brought up Anthony Lamb a couple of years ago, and that's certainly fair. But I don't know if Kuminga was ready a couple of years ago, and we're going to find out if he's ready now.
Yeah, good call by Priest. I wanted to go after him for James Weissman.
Oh,
he's the biggest James Weissman fan. But and sometimes I butt heads with Priest, but that was a really well thought out, and I think it carried a lot of merit. And I'm the last guy that wants to get after Steve Kerr, and I think it's an easy target to get after a coach. We don't want to bottom feed, especially when a team is struggling. But I do think that there's something there to that. And I would bring up last year, because there were moments where you could see that Jonathan Kuminga was a impactful basketball player, and then for some inexplicable reason, he wouldn't play. And Jonathan Kuminga, maybe it was a bit immature, but he called the coach out and said, "What's going on here? Like, why am I not getting more run? I'm playing well." And as a result, Steve Kerr played him, and as a result, Jonathan Kuminga responded. This gets back to what it is that I said in the beginning of the year, or the beginning of the show, is like, this seems to be sort of reactionary on the part of Steve Kerr. He scores 33 points. Now I'm inserting him into the starting lineup. I think to Priest's point, if you're a coach, you should recognize that somebody you took in the lottery at some point you have got to have some faith in and let him play and play through his mistakes so that does not have his head on a swivel where if he's missing a couple of shots, has a couple of turnovers, he's looking back at Steve Kerr waiting to get yanked. Like, that's the relationship between the two. And I think what Priest is trying to illuminate all of us is that in order for him to be the sort of player that we all envision that Jonathan Kuminga could be, this commitment to him getting to the starting lineup or getting regular minutes every night so that he can potentially be that star is a commitment that maybe Steve Kerr should have arrived at a lot sooner than this.
But I think it's unfair because we're assuming that Kuminga was this player 2 years ago. I don't think he was. There were times in which Jonathan Kuminga looked like he was a deer in headlights, where he didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do, and maybe most importantly, 2 years ago wasn't as effective of a player when he played with Curry as he is now. And some people are still talking about the fact that, and you mentioned it off the top, that he's deferential. You know, he's hesitant when Steph is on the floor because there's a different pecking order. 3 years ago, it was Curry, it was Clay, it was Dre, it was Wiggins. That's a lot of different mouths you got to feed in different ways. I'm sorry, Kuminga's not a priority on that basketball team. He's just not. So asking the head coach to basically lean into a 21-year-old, sure, could he have done it better? Yes, I'm not saying Steve Kerr's perfect. But selling that to Steph Curry and Draymond Green, I think is just something that we gloss over. Like, if Kuminga makes his mistakes, yes, he's better for that. Curry doesn't want to babysit. Draymond Green didn't want to babysit 2 years ago. You know, like, they would rather play with those veteran players that they came in and know that they have previously won with. I think that's a natural thing to expect. And if you're Steve Kerr, are you choosing your Hall of Famers or are you choosing this unknown entity that, yes, was a lottery pick, but hadn't shown you enough to just give him the keys? Yes, the Warriors are in a place now where they basically have to lean into him because they have no choice. They can't score the ball. Only Curry, Wiggins, and Kuminga are consistent enough to score the basketball for this team.
I think my point is that I'll forget about 2 years ago. Last year, I think there were times where he came into his own, and it was just inexplicable as to why he didn't play. He would play well, and then he'd get DNP'd. And it got to the point where I was with, the kid's making some sense here. Why isn't he getting run? Like, to your point, there have been times throughout his career where it's like, it's clear that you're still too young for this, especially for a team where we're synonymous. We're built for winning titles. And you're dribbling into traffic and this thing is not slowing down for you. And we don't have the time to nurture you. All right. We're looking to win a title now, not 5 years from now, like that of Detroit or Orlando or some of the other teams 2 years ago. But last year, I think it was applicable when you looked at the Golden State Warriors to what it is that we're saying this year, that it was a team that needed a number 2 scorer. It wasn't Klay Thompson, although he played well, but somebody who could be that guy in clutch moments, that was a consistent number 2 to Steph Curry. And Jonathan Kuminga showed glimpses of being the guy that they drafted number 7 overall. And yet, I think it's just sort of pervasive that there isn't a level of confidence in the part of Steve Kerr going back to last year. And I think if he leaned in on that a little bit more, that you wouldn't have this player who his confidence is shot. The minute he misses his first 2 shots or turns the ball over, he knows that the clock is ticking before he has to go and sit next to Steve Kerr. And I think it's the rapport between him and the coach. Forget about Steph Curry and Draymond Green. That just accentuates things. I don't think that there's a level of confidence with Jonathan Kuminga in his game because I don't think he senses there's a level of confidence with Steve Kerr and the young player JK.
Well, I don't think Kerr has necessarily had the confidence in a ton of young players outside. And maybe that's why people are so pissed at Podziemski's. They feel like he has the confidence that someone like Kuminga and Moody, for that matter, were never afforded. I do think that there is room for criticism with how Kerr has handled Kuminga. But to me, it's also, we've gotten to the point where, okay, this is what you wanted. If you are truly of the belief that they have mishandled Kuminga and not prioritizing him to this point in his career or last season, for example, now you got it. This is what you wanted. It is put up or shut up time for both Kerr and Kuminga, and the Warriors got to figure this thing out. 888-957-9570 is the number. We got some calls we got to get to on the other side. Apologies. We'll get to Raven, Frank, and Scott on the other side of this commercial break. But we got to hit one right now. Evan Giddings, Dan Devone, 95.7 The Game. This is Warriors This Week. We're back after this.
So, how's your research going?
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
This is when the season gets interesting, okay? When people start to wonder, the doubt starts to creep in. Are you as good as we thought? Are you as bad as we think? We're trying to figure this thing out, okay? The Warriors lost last night. They've lost 6 of 7. Dan apparently needs more help with his camera. Like, seriously.
What did I do?
You done nothing
Dylan
is probably the biggest issue.
But I don't do anything nefarious. I just click into the internet.
But moving so fast, it's a camera that tracks you. For people that are listening on radio, we're on YouTube and Twitch, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. We have cameras set up in
studio. You want to see my laptop?
That's not a laptop.
I know. It's my laptop. It's my version of a laptop. This is what I'm going back to. The old notepad. Give me a Peachy and a number 2 pencil. The hell with this. Every time I go into this computer, I got to see, I'm like a pitcher, and here comes Ken to pull me. That slow walk out to the mound.
Yeah, he is. He's the skipper. You're the right arm that can't figure it out. By the way, that notebook looks like you took it swimming this morning. Where is that thing tucked away?
It was folded in my pocket. And so
you fit an entire notebook in your pocket?
Seriously, it was like sophomore year at SI. I'm like, the hell with it. I'm just going to, there's something to putting pen to paper. It's the best way to create recall, memory, so that these things sort of set in with you. We're too reliant on, we have a whole generation that is just, it's hypnotized in this hypnotic state of this addiction to being online. You TikTok and coconuts you.
I'm sorry, what?
Exactly.
I can't focus for more than 10 seconds.
No, you're atypical for your generation because you read, you have an interest on different things, and
I know how to read. That makes me so special.
Well,
the comprehension part is I lack a little bit, but you help me through these things again, and I try to help you, and maybe we'll get you an iPad for next week, and maybe we'll get you a camera that works, and maybe again when I have to set up things for you in the morning. I should take you through the steps in order to have it so that I don't know if you can put pen to paper technologically speak, whatever version of that is for you. But we can make strides together. How about that?
All right. Hold my hand. Take me into this century.
Well, it's been 24 years. I hope you get there at some point. 888-957-9570 is the number. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings, Warriors This Week, every single Saturday, 9 to noon. Let's go out to Raven in San Francisco, has been hanging on patiently. Raven, welcome to the program. What's going on?
Hey, thank you. First, I want to tell you when life throws you lemons, make lemonade.
I know.
And so that's making the best out of whatever life throws to you. And then I wanted to comment on the caller who said putting Steph and Draymond in the last 6 minutes would ensure like they're playing the worst of each team, where no opposing coach would allow their worst to be in if Steph and Draymond are in. So that's just not realistic. And I don't think you can look at Steph's 22 average as him falling off, because the other players like Hield, Wiggins, Melton, and Waters was playing so well, it allowed Steph and Draymond to get more rest. So naturally he was in less because it wasn't required. So that moved his average down. And just lastly, I'm not convinced that every time Steph and Draymond are out that they're hurt, because they played 3 games in 4 days, so they needed to rest. And so they don't want to keep getting fined, so they have to be creative. And so that's the extent of what I wanted to say.
Appreciate that, Raven. Yeah, I think, look, to me, Curry's health is obviously paramount to this season. And the 23 points, yes, is a result of his minutes coming down. It's also a result of him, like against, I think it was Denver. The stat that I always look at with Curry nowadays, or when I'm watching a game, how many of his field goal attempts are threes? Like the percentage, his 3-point rate. Because what that tells me is if you're not taking as many twos, you're not able to get A, by your defender, or B, into the lane when you need to. And that is naturally going to happen as you get older. That doesn't mean that Curry's not playing very well this season. He's shooting more efficiently from 3 than he was even last year. He's shooting 41%. But the amount of attempts he's taken has come down, and the amount of threes that he's taken has stayed relatively similar. So to just overlook the fact that Curry is taken a step back so far offensively over the average. Yes, he still had big games against Boston, was really good against Oklahoma City. He was obviously sensational against Dallas. All I'm saying is those performances come fewer and far between.
I don't see, I guess, what everybody else is seeing, that Steph Curry is notably slower or not the same sort of player or proficient scorer that he was last year or over the last couple of years. Now, certainly he's not the same player as far as scoring the basketball like that of 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. But the other thing that we're missing here is what we've talked about all along, is that there is no number 2 to Steph Curry. That if I'm anybody, if I'm Minnesota, whoever it is the opponent is, I'm running at Steph Curry. I'm taking 3 guys, and I'm taking the ball out of his hand. Why? Because there is nobody on that roster that has proven that they can score with any consistency, especially now with Wiggins out of the lineup. And I think that has to be taken into account. What it is that we've talked about, where this is a team that can't score the ball. Well, Steph Curry can. The problem is that nobody else can, and as a result, what you're going to do defensively is that you're taking the ball out of Steph's hands. And when he crosses the timeline, let's not only run 2 guys at him, but let's shade 3 guys. Like if he decides to cross over and get to the rim, let's make sure we have help defenders, because that's the problem. It's Steph and nobody else. So yes, logistically, offensively, your numbers they're going to dip considerably. He needs help. You space the floor, you give him other shooters, other scorers, and Steph is fine.
But we've been saying this for a couple of years. I mean, who was the number 2 last season?
Klay Thompson statistically, but I wouldn't put him as a number 2.
Okay, Curry was third-team All-NBA. He averaged 27 points a game. 2 years ago, who was his number 2?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but now more than ever, you need a number 2. I mean, I recognize that he's...
All I'm trying to ask is, why do they need the number 2 more than ever? I think it's because he's older and he's got creaky
we're saying
knees.
The same thing.
Yeah.
But I do think it's worth noting that as you encroach the age 37, that you need help more than ever.
Yeah, and I think that's why they've turned to Kuminga. It's partially because they have nowhere left to turn, but it's also because you got to get younger, or you got to be more reliant on younger players in hopes that those guys can get better, because Steph Curry is not going to transform back into an MVP candidate that he was 3 or 4 years ago. In all probability, he's going closer towards the end of his career, and you need guys to step up, I think, to kind of account for some of that fall off. Can Curry still be great? Yes, I'm not saying he's cooked by any means. He can be fantastic, but he needs someone to help get him to a place where he can close games. And right now, I think the only guy on that roster that I see that can consistently have the ability to do it is either Andrew Wiggins or Jonathan Kuminga. And Wiggins has been a bit up and down. Kuminga's been up and down, and that's why the Warriors have struggled offensively. Let's go to Scott in Berkeley. Wants to get on the program, get in the conversation. 888-957-957 is the number. What's up, Scott?
How you doing, fellas?
Fantastic.
In a way, I don't worry about this because teams go through transition. And when you get older, there are things that are going to happen, especially in a game that favors the younger player. If they go into the lottery this year, I'm fine. I mean, if they get the magic ball and get flagged, great. But there's still Ace Bailey. There's still Dylan Harper. There's still the other kid at Duke. The other 2 kids, I guess, at Duke. That would be fine. In a way, are we lost because of the injury situation? OKC losing Holmgren, the whole New Orleans roster. What's happened in Philadelphia, though, I kind of look at the Philadelphia situation and I go, this is what Daryl Morey deserves. I'm appreciative of the last 10 years. And to a certain extent, I think we're all sitting here judging the team by 2015, 2017, 2018, and 2022. This isn't those teams. the NBA is a work in progress. I think Silver has set up things so that it's difficult for teams to maintain, well, at least the more veteran teams to maintain a level of competitiveness because of the cap and because of the aprons. And this is kind of what this is what we're living with. I'm not upset by this because this is what happens with the game. And that's all I've got to say about it. Take care, fellas.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate the call. Thanks for listening. I don't think this is a lottery team. I mean, I never thought that they were a championship team or a contender, even when they were 12-3. But I never felt like this team is a lottery team. The other part, too, if you want to be honest, like the Warriors hard capped themselves. Okay, so yes, there are consequences in the modern game for spending a lot of money. And that's probably because of the Warriors and because of the Clippers, and the league wanted to create more parity. But this particular season, the Warriors hard capped themselves at the first apron so they could use the mid-level to go get Melton. That was a choice. If they really wanted to spend a lot of money, or as much as possible, to try and maximize this roster, they could have done that. They didn't. They decided because either the Clippers didn't want to play hardball or the Jazz were asking for too much, that they did not want to or could not trade for Paul George and Lauri Markkanen. I think that was the pairing that they were hoping that they could bring in to basically stay above the second apron, go all in, and try and make a run at it again.
If you really think about it, the Warriors are sort of in a very precarious situation because you don't want to be middling, and that seems to be where they're headed. Like, this is not necessarily a bad team, and I don't think it's a top 3 seed, maybe not a top 4 seed. And when your core and your best player, and one of the best players to ever do it, is aging, clearly, and you think about a future. Well, when you think about a future and you want to be relevant, there's one of two ways to do it, and it's sort of the way that Orlando, OKC, were you just, Philadelphia in the process going back a couple of years ago, where you're just a bad team and you get into the lottery every year, and then you can rebuild through the draft. You're never going to find another Steph Curry. It's not going to happen in our lifetimes, but at least you find another young core which you can identify and then put pieces around it, and then there's another structure, and then you can build from there. But when you're the Warriors and you have an aging core of Steph and Draymond, and then you have just a bunch of okay basketball players, it becomes very challenging to see where it is this team is headed. Forget about this year. Steph Curry's going to be 38 next year. And, you can do the math going forward. What does it look like 3 to 5 years from now should be the biggest concern for the Golden State Warriors. Because right now, you're a team that's a little bit better than 500, I think, at the end of the season. And that's okay if your stars are younger and you can make trades. We can go through all of these permutations during the offseason, who they should get and who should they pair. But the hourglass it's running out, man. And you're not rebuilding. So what is the identity of this team going forward as it relates to Steph Curry in his final year or two? But
when you say that, it makes me wonder why people want to move and trade their younger guys in hopes of getting a star to maybe have a chance. That's what I don't get. You're right. I do think the Warriors are between a rock and a hard place. And the rock is Steph Curry and Draymond Green and that core. And the hard place is their younger players that they're trying to promote and help develop and all the rest. They're either too old or too young, and the players that are currently in their prime have not produced enough so far this season for them to not be, a team that people foresee contending in the West. That's why last night is important, because when you prioritize, and I think that this is the first time that I have seen Steve Kerr proactively do it, when you prioritize Kuminga over Draymond Green, that's an inflection point. That's an inflection point in your franchise. Does it mean that the Warriors are going to lean all the way into their young players? Not necessarily. But it means for the first time that Kerr, at the very least, recognizes that his young guys are going to dictate how far this season can go. And I have not seen that from the Warriors maybe since, before Steve Kerr got here. Ever since Steve Kerr's been here, he has had the luxury of Curry, of Draymond, of Clay, of a cast of characters that have been productive, that have been proven, and that have been champions. That is not the case on this roster. The champions are the old guys. They're the old regime. And they're still good, and they are still going to help you win games. Draymond might be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Curry can help you close, but they're diminished versions of their former selves. That's why moving Kuminga into the starting lineup and trying to figure out what he is, that's significant. It's a seismic shift in the Warriors that we haven't seen in over a decade. And if it fails, I wouldn't be necessarily shocked, because I think it's a lot to ask of a player that hasn't proven much over his first 3.5 seasons. But if it works, well, then to your point, Dan, you can, I think, legitimately envision something productive in 3 to 5 years. And that's where the Warriors are at.
Yeah, I mean, Podziemski's a starter. Trace Jackson-Davis started the season. I mean,
but in a perfect world, are those two players starters? I mean, Kevon Looney is now a starting center because TJD's played himself out, and Podziemski, I think they had envisioned being the backup point guard for a backcourt that was Curry and Melton.
I think the problem with the Warriors is that this youth that they don't want to move off on, or could be something that when people talk about if you're going to go make a trade and a big splash and bring back a star, you're going to have to give up on this youth. Well, what is the youth at the end of the day? Are we not overrating the Podziemskis and the Trace Jackson-Davis and the Jonathan Kumingas? Because this idea that we got to hang on to our younger players, well, you can hang on to them, but what exactly, who exactly are they in terms of being good basketball players in the league? So this could be the beginning of something, and I hate to go here, sort of ugly, because your younger players aren't necessarily very good, and your older players are too old, and you're far from hitting that sweet spot. And they always talk about how dynasties do not end well, and this could be case in point, because they decided not to rebuild. I thought, we did a show when they decided not to bring back Chris Paul, and they were out on marketing, and Paul George didn't come here. I was like, okay, there seems to be a direction here, that the Warriors are hitting reset, rebuild, whatever it is that you want to call it, that they're going to, not deal with second aprons. They're going to stop spending money. They're going to try and identify a new, younger core, and that this is going to be a team that is not going to be vying for playoffs or Western Conference titles for the next 2 to 3 years. Call it a soft rebuild. But this is something that I can't get my arms around, because it's not a rebuild, and you're not good enough to win the West. So what the hell are you? What you are is you're an aging team with no identity and a star who's soon going to be somebody that you can't rely on as your number one, and then you have no fallback, and there is really sort of no course in terms of going forward as far as the future is concerned.
888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings, Dan Devone with you here on 95.7 The Game. Let's go down to San Jose and talk to Frank. Wants to get into the conversation. Frank, what's going on? Good morning.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Dan, I appreciate your appreciation of pen and paper as a traveling notary public. I do deal in ink and paper a lot. Hey, just want to do 2 quick things. Addressing the Steve Kerr Priest call. I think he's a very polarizing figure, and every time that we get in a little losing streak, it brings out the Steve Kerr critics, and I just think that's hilarious because you look at his track record, and I would like to see even like the greatest coach of our modern era, Greg Popovich, do much better with this current collection of characters. Second thing would be, I think the worst thing that's happened this year was especially to our chemistry, was the loss of DeAndre Melton. That was devastating in my opinion because like his defense replaced Klay Thompson's defense of 4 years ago, I would say, and he was super versatile in the offense with 3-point shooting. So I think that's been the most hurtful thing to our chemistry and the current losing streak. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was just contrasting two guys that really frustrate me are Wiggins and Kuminga. I think they're both just, I don't know, they both are head cases in that you can't ever count on them. You see flashes of brilliance from Wiggins where he just looks so smooth on his three and drives the lane and looks like, Jordan sometimes in there. And then sometimes I get anxiety every time he touches the ball because then he becomes a turnover machine sometimes. He's not a strong ball handler. And comparing him to Kuminga, I think Kuminga has so much potential, but again, it's his head. He can't get out of his head. Maybe it is when Steph and Draymond are on the court that just brings him down. But, if you look at it last night, he was making strong drives, dribbling to the bucket really well and finishing strong. And then last night, I don't know, he had a couple of drives, but most of the time he was just like stuck in the corner over there, waiting for Steph to do something. Or when he did have the ball, he wasn't aggressive. He was backing up. He was like waiting for something to happen instead of trying to make something happen like he is fully capable of, in my opinion. That's just what I was noticing last night. I was like, Kuminga, go to the hole, make something happen. And he just wasn't doing it last night for some reason.
Well, I think in comparison to Houston, we talked about this a little bit off the top of the show. Thank you, Frank, for the call. I think the difference between Minnesota and Houston's defense, because they're both statistically this year really good, it's that Minnesota has a rim protector. And the Warriors this season have struggled offensively generally with teams that have a quality rim protector. A Gobert, even a Jokic for Denver. I think he's a better defender than people give him credit for. Houston doesn't really have that. And I think that's where Kuminga, for example, was able to expose the Rockets, is that Şengün is a good offensive player. He's gifted. He's not a good rim protector. Steven Adams used to be a good rim protector. He's no longer that player anymore. It's impossible to ask Kuminga or Wiggins or whoever else you want to throw in there. They're going to struggle with it's why they got blown out by 40 against Cleveland. I think it's why they play better against a team like Boston, because Boston doesn't have, well, at least they played them without Porzingis. They don't have a ton of rim protection. Oklahoma City, the first time they beat them, Chet got hurt and they didn't have Hartenstein. The second time they played Oklahoma City, Hartenstein was in, and I think you saw him bother the Warriors. So, the Warriors are, right now their offense is extremely feast or famine. And for the last 2 weeks, it's been more famine than feast.
I think when it gets to Jonathan Kuminga, I just go right back to sometimes he is energetic and he attacks the rim, and other times he's just not that player. And I don't think he overthinks it that, I better not flash the paint because Rudy Gobert's there. There were avenues for him. There was a baseline to be taken, and he didn't want anything to do with it. And that's sort of where he's at as a player, is that there's some nights when he's a dominant basketball player, but for whatever reason, and to me, it's because he's deferential to Steph Curry, to Draymond Green, to Steve Kerr, that he knows there's a quick hook when those two guys are available, that he's too conscious of not making the right basketball play, that he loses all confidence and climbs into that shell, and he becomes sheepish. This is why he doesn't attack the rim.
One more segment on the other side of Warriors this week. 888-957-9570 is the number. Also got a few texts to get to on the Comcast Business text line. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone. We're back after this on 95.7 The Game.
Hey, it's Willard and Dibs for Safeway. Enjoy these amazing deals for members. And as always,
But you help build apps.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Yeah, appetizers.
We call them poo-poos.
Case in point, turn your mic on.
We call them poo-poos in Hawaii.
Poo-poos?
Poo-poo.
I know.
Poo-poo platters.
Poo-poo platters?
You don't know this?
I know poo-poo says there's a place down the block from where I live.
East Bay.
Oh, please. Well, first of all, I'm basically the city now, Dan. I mean, people call, they say I don't know where I'm from anymore. I switched up. I changed. No longer an East Bay guy. Although I was concerned, as we were talking about earlier this week, for some of my friends who were evacuated due to a false tsunami warning earlier. And I have respect for Mother Nature, is what I have, that apparently you do not. And that might be where I still have my East Bay roots.
No, Mother Nature's everything to me. Like, that's the one thing about swimming. We'd get to it at some point. What was the over and under today? Is that, when you leave terra firma, when you go into somebody else's backyard, that's the rush about swimming. Listen, if I get hit by a seal, if I get hit by a shark, don't want it to happen. But if it does, hey, man, I took that oath when I stepped into the ocean or I decided to play in your world. Like, I don't want somebody in Hawaii, if somebody gets attacked by a shark, what the locals would do, because some locals would consider them as gods, that they don't believe in bringing in the team and the shark hunter to go out and kill this shark. First of all, you usually don't get the same shark, but if it's a man-eating shark and we're bringing in somebody, an expert from Florida or Australia to kill, oftentimes what locals will do will sabotage this person that was brought in as the guy that's the assassinator who's going to take out this shark. My point is that when you I think go into the water, you have to be under the realization that this is, if something happens to you, it's the risk, it's the rush, it's the reason why we swim. When you're done, it's like, oh my God, man, I'm still in one piece, and it's the chance of getting bumped by a seal or a sea lion snarling at you or seeing a dorsal fin in the water.
You made it sound like you're doing a tour of duty every single time you step in the Pacific Ocean. You don't get a Purple Heart for bumping into a seal.
So there's a
They're not airdropping you in Afghanistan every time you step into the Dolphin Club.
There's a seal that...
My life.
The seal bumped me the other day.
Putting it in the hands of the ocean.
Oh, God, man. I don't want to get bumped by a seal. It freaks me out, man. It's like I'm going to have a heart attack in the water. And it was a pup, wide-eyed pup, looking at me, and I'm like... I just swam. Because you never know. No, dude, the hell with the cute. Animals are unpredictable. You just don't know. So I'm like, I'm not dealing. I'm going to the water. I'm going to the shore. I'm going to the beach. I'm not swimming all the way back to the club. And as I get to the beach, I look back, and this big wide-eyed pup is looking at me. It's following me down the beach. Like, why don't you want to play? Like, come on in. What are you doing? Let's play. It's literally like my pet as I walk down the beach back to the club so I can go shower and sauna and get the hell out of there. It's following me. And so I finally get to the pier where I'm like within 20 yards, and I look at this thing and I'm like, the hell with it, man. I'm going back in the water. Let him bump me. He wants to play. Let's play. I jumped back in, bumped me a couple of times. I went to the shore and got out.
So the Dolphin Club has a domesticated seal that you guys play with?
No.
You found a puppy?
No.
That's a dolphin.
Nothing is domesticated.
All right, well,
comes to seals.
Let's go to my side of the bridge. The hell with you seal grazers. Leroy's in Oakland. Wants to talk about the Warriors. Leroy, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, gentlemen? It is a pleasure to be on. I'm a longtime Warrior fan, and, for a long time, I've been hearing the Warriors need a big man, the Warriors need a big man. And I didn't really want to believe it, but now I'm starting to look at the team and the way it's currently constructed. And I do now think that we are a fundamentally sound big man away from, being able to compete in the Western Conference for the top 1, 2, 3 spots. And, the type of fan that I am, like when my team needs something, I'll be like a scout, man. I'll start looking around and see what we got, and I'm looking at the money and everything. And I'm looking at this center, this 7'1" center out of Toronto named Jakob Pertl. And, man, I'm looking at the footage. He hit 30 against the Pacers. He hit like 35 against Boston. Legit 7-1. I think he's averaging like 16 points a game this season, almost 12 rebounds. He does some of everything well and just fundamentally sound. And he's not going to come at a too much at an expensive price. You might can like package a guy like Milton and GP together and get him, but it won't really like take a lot. But man, is he fundamentally sound? And if we could get a guy like that, man, that would be awesome. I think with what we have now, we can compete for, the top 1, 2, 3 spots in the West. What do you guys think about him if you guys have seen him before?
Thanks, Leroy. Well, I'm with you. He definitely puts up numbers. And I do know this because he was an early fetch for my fantasy NBA team this season. The thing about Poeltl, like I don't want to dismiss the idea of making a trade for a big man, but I think that's the kind of player that if the Warriors are going to make a move at some point this season, it's probably a guy like him, a player that is on a team that maybe wants to get off his contract. I'm looking right now, Poeltl's making $19.5 million for the next 3 seasons, including a player option. He's a guy that is more of a traditional post, doesn't shoot it that well. He's not a game-changing player, but I think that's the kind of guy that the Warriors are more inclined to go trade for than a Jimmy Butler, a Paul George, a Giannis, all the names that everyone wants.
You don't mean the position center, because I don't think they need a center.
No, but I think a guy like Jonas Valanciunas is someone that, for example, is attainable. He makes $10 million a year. He's relatively cheap. The Washington Wizards stink. They want to get off him. I think they signed him to trade him. I think like those kinds of guys but again, they're depth moves. I think a center is something that the Warriors actually might decide they need because maybe Trace Jackson Davis turns out that he's not someone that can help you. I don't know.
Wizards, by the way, shout out, have lost 16 consecutive games.
Dude, they didn't win in November.
That's wild. I don't think, listen, maybe if we had this discussion 2 or 3 years ago, the center discussion, maybe it has a little bit more teeth to it. This year, there are so many things that this team needs, and center's not one of them. You can always use a center, but Kevon Looney's actually played very, very well. And he's sort of replaced Trace Jackson Davis as far as the minutes, and Kevon Looney he's a beautiful man. Probably the most disrespected, forgot about, and a guy that just does whatever's asked and never chirps, never complains, and he's still here, and he's showing everybody that he can still set those screens, rebound, protect the rim, and on occasion when you need him to, get his own, get some offense and be Kevon Looney of his days back in Milwaukee. But that's not – Kevon Looney's fine. Trace Jackson Davis hopefully will get back to where TJD was a year ago. That to me does not jump out at me that the Warriors need a big. We've seen the Warriors win without a traditional big. There's so much more to this team. It's about youth, and it's about scoring. It's about wing defenders. It's about wing scorers. It's about, again, that proverbial number 2 who's going to fill it up that's not named Steph Curry. And if it's a center, then God bless. If Giannis wants to come here on the cheap, then yeah, go get him. But in terms of a center being the reason that the Warriors are struggling right now, I don't see it.
No, I don't think the center position is something that – look, they can use upgrades across the roster. If I was to ask you what the Warriors – if they were to address a position, like which position would you want?
Off guard.
Someone who can score.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So –
well, that's not a position.
Well, that's true. But I hear what you're saying. A 2 opposite Curry, right?
That can score.
Okay, so we're on the same page. I think the most likely big name trade candidate that the Warriors could realistically acquire is Jimmy Butler. I know that doesn't move the needle for a lot of people, but I think if you are going to try to go all in, I think he's the guy that makes the most sense because that he plays winning basketball. He is a guy that you can legitimately envision as a number 2 alongside Steph. And he also doesn't have much money on the books in the coming years. You don't have to give him a contract. Yeah, he's got a player option for next season that he said he doesn't want to pick up. Even if he does, it's still just one more year.
What am I giving up?
You're probably giving up a lot. You're probably giving up Wiggins, Kuminga, and a bunch of filler. Maybe you pick. But it's someone that the Warriors have expressed interest in before. They did so this offseason. Again, I mean, Curry, Butler, Green, because you're probably sending out Wiggins and maybe Kuminga. I don't know. Maybe you get to hold on to Kuminga. I'm not so sure. But to me, I don't know that I like it, because I think the Warriors still have a month or two to figure out where their wings are at, particularly Wiggins and Kuminga playing with Curry and Draymond if he comes back into the starting lineup. But the most likeliest trade candidate that the Warriors could acquire, I think it's Jimmy Buckets.
Well, that means that you're playing for a title in the next, this year or next 2 years. Do you see this as a team that's ready to win a title without?
I don't, but I also don't know what else they can do to catapult themselves back into contention. I mean, all right, let's be honest. The reason why the Warriors are stinky right now, buddy, you got to shoot the ball better. Pajemski, can you find nylon one time in a row? Kuminga, you got to be able to do it more than just one night in a week. Wiggins, I need you back at 17 consistently per game. Curry, we need you to close. We just do. Draymond has to be better defense. They need everyone on this team to play better. That's why they've been so bad compared to their start to the season. Lindy Waters, I don't know where you went. You got to shoot the ball better. Gary Payton II, can we do something? The players on their team, I think, legitimately give them reason to believe they can improve, but all of them have been playing badly at the same time, and that's where you run into losing 6 of 7.
Yeah, agreed. And listen, let's finish the show with some level of optimism, and maybe this maybe this is just a bad spell, and that they're going to get back to who they really are. Maybe who they really are was that team we saw in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, but you don't believe that.
No, I don't. One thing that I do believe when it relates to Lindy Waters, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, Pajemski, that I do think that there is something to when the big bad bear is in the room, and that's Steve Kerr, that's Draymond Green, and Steph Curry. If these guys are missing shots, they become very timid. And that's just natural. I think that's understandable. I don't think it's anything that Steph Curry is doing specifically. I don't think he's saying anything. And Draymond, it's just the fact that they recognize that, if I'm missing shots, I can't keep shooting it with Steph on the floor. I got to get him involved, or I'm going to get pulled by Steve Kerr. This is Warrior basketball after all, and I'm just a kid. And I think that the one thing that has to happen, if I'm Steve Kerr, if I'm Steph Curry, I sit these guys down and have a meeting, and I'm like, Lindy, listen, shoot it, man. You have full range to shoot the basketball. You're not going anywhere, okay? We need you to score. There's no such thing as a bad shot. I trust you. You're not going to get pulled. Same with you, Jonathan Kuminga. Don't worry about me. Shoot it. Be you. Go nuts. Go off. And the same with Pajemski. Although Pajemski, I don't even know with that guy. I mean, he's just jury's still out as to whether or not he's even potentially a good basketball player.
Well, come on.
Well, because I know
he was good last season.
Yeah, he was. But again, I mean, you need to see one more than if there's one good year, one bad year. I need to see another year to determine whether you're good or bad in terms of a basketball player and scoring the ball.
That's fair.
But the other guys have they have history. You know that they can score. So but I think that butt cheeks get tight when,
Well, you also get lemon booty, to go back to lemons, when you start to lose games. I think that you're right. The timidness with this team it's palpable. Like, you can see the timidity. Damn it. It's palpable.
Great word.
Yeah, did you just come up with it?
No, it is a word, right?
You got it in your notepad over there?
I'm looking at Riz, the guy from Reardon.
You're double checking with an enemy or a rival.
It's a word.
Oh, thank you, Big Ken. What hat does Ken have on now as we close out the show?
Best hat in the world, Oakland A's. The thing is, Dan, as I get a little timid myself, speaking about this, when you win games, you're able to play with freedom and you play with independence and everybody's shooting and everyone's having fun and everyone's trusting in the system. But when you start to lose, that's when doubt creeps in and you wonder, should I take this shot? Or does the ball need to go here? You start to want to play perfectly. And that's something the Warriors can't do if they're going to be successful. They don't have the talent that Minnesota has, that Houston has, Oklahoma City, maybe even Denver, Dallas. They don't have the talent. Where they have an advantage or have to have an advantage is their chemistry and cohesion. And I think that's where, at the beginning of the year, that's where they were a step ahead of a lot of teams. One of the reasons why I think they got off to such a hot start is because they were already together and figured out who they were before other teams did. For example, Minnesota. Minnesota's just starting to figure out how they're going to play with Randall and DiVincenzo instead of Cat. So now the Warriors are being pushed back against, and I think doubt's creeping in. So they got to figure out how to get out of that mindset of timidity, Dan.
Yeah, I think that it's part of the growth of a young basketball player. Klay Thompson understood it. I'm shooting regardless, whether we're down 20 or up 20. That's how I made my mark in the NBA. You've got to be wired differently if you're going to be a scorer in this league. Wemby's got it. Wembanyama he's shooting, baby. And he's shooting threes. And he's 7'6". Whether you like it or not, he's putting it up. And there's got to be more of that. You got to have sort of this, there's got to be more of a mentality in the part of Jonathan Kuminga that's like, I don't care. They play every game as though Steph and Draymond aren't there. and that you're the guy. And stop worrying about, stop being so self-conscious. Lose the consciousness. And just be a guy that's just going to ball out regardless. Even if you turn it over on successive plays. Even if you miss 3 shots. Like you've got to go to that place. And that's, every player has that. Every good scorer in this league has that in them.
Yeah, but the other side of it is are these guys good scorers? It's like, yeah, hey, Pods, don't worry. You miss one? That's okay. Step into the next one. Shoot it with confidence. Well, yeah, but you throw it off the side of the backboard. It's, well, maybe actually you might want to hold on a little bit, get that ball to somebody else who can put the ball in the hole. It's like, I think they're players that are supposed to be, for example, good shooters right now are not shooting well enough or are being guarded heavily enough. And other guys are not bailing them out. I think other teams, there's a scouting report out on the Warriors. Okay, we'd rather have Podziemski take threes. Again, I think we ran this by our listeners last week. They got a lot of darables or specialists. They have players that play well on one end of the floor or the other. They don't have a lot of two-way guys right now. And that's why I think they're trying to, again, feature or showcase or empower someone like Kuminga because his ceiling is more two-way than anybody on the roster outside of maybe Andrew Wiggins or Steph Curry, if you feel like his defense is adequate.
Yeah, and when we looked about this team, when we thought about this team and we're analyzing when they were doing well early on, it was the collective, right? It was 13 guys. It was it was different guys and these wave of players that were coming at you. But now that they're struggling a bit, you begin to break it up by individuals, and now suddenly you're like, okay, now that we're not seeing you as a group and we're beginning to see you as individual players, well, Slow-Mo's not necessarily very good, and Lindy Waters isn't really that good of a basketball player. And
well, they're good role players among teams that have top-tier talent, but that's where the Warriors have had a void.
Yeah.
I think like Lindy Waters is a good player. Kyle Anderson is a good player. Gary Payton II is a good player. But they're all good players if they don't have to play up slots. Like the hierarchy after Curry and Draymond, it's, on a given night, Is Lindy Waters your third best player? Maybe, but that means you're probably going to lose that game. They don't have, Wiggins would be their three, but my point is that there are too many players on their team that are not giving you enough consistency. And then I think that's why you run into a lot of 90-point performances like they had last night against Minnesota.
Yeah, there's too many guys that don't score the basketball. There's too many role players. You can have one GP2. You can maybe have a Kevon Looney in a GP2, but a Kevon Looney, a GP2, a Slow-Mo, a Draymond Green, a Pajemski, and the list goes on of players that don't score the basketball. It's too many for one team. And that's really where we started this show and may as well take it out, is that they just got to fill it up. And to have that conversation with the Golden State Warriors, who rewrote the rules in terms of how to play basketball because they shot threes at a ridiculous clip and changed the sport, and now we're at a point where, they need to score. I never thought we would have that conversation as long as Steph was on a basketball floor, but apparently we are. Hey, I have our once again, our white guy of the week, if you will, in terms of our potential sixth man of the year.
Quietly, whites have been making a run at the end of 2024, and I'm not going to, I don't think it's going to last very long.
In basketball.
Well, and in football. But I'm not saying it's going to carry over to 2025, but Caucasians, we're coming.
So last week I gave you Ty Jerome as potentially your sixth man of the year. We had Buddy Hield in that conversation.
I think Ty Jerome is part brother.
Oh, he is?
But sure, yeah.
Okay. Well, then the hell with Ty Jerome. You want to hear who this week's sixth man of the year potentially is?
Sixth
Not
man?
Russell Westbrook?
I know who you're going to talk about.
You don't.
Yes, I do.
You don't.
His nickname is P. Rabbit. Peyton Pritchard,
My
baby.
God, the pride of Oregon.
Wesleyan.
That dude can,
that guy's a stud.
You can't hold that guy.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on there?
I got to see pods on him. Little white-on-white crime.
Dude, he will... That guy is just unstoppable.
Yeah, he's averaging 17 points a game this year. Talk about a leap. He is a player that, again, but if he's starting for the Celtics, well, he can on occasion, but on a contending team, I don't know if Peyton Pritchard is somebody that is going to all of a sudden take you to the next level. But as a sixth man, he's perfect. And the Warriors have, my biggest issue with the Warriors, I think they got too many sixth men. They got too many guys. And Draymond Green now is apparently a sixth man. They got Buddy Hield's a sixth man. Draymond Green's a sixth man. In 4 years, Curry might be a sixth man.
Six men can usually score. The Warriors don't have any of those guys.
Well, that's true. But yeah, no, you're right. White guy of the week. Shout out Peyton Pritchard. It's also nice, not a lot of us are guards. Typically a lot of big men.
And A.G. Green, or is it A.J.
Also,
Green?
particularly American Caucasians. A lot of them, the Euros. I can't really claim them. I'm not claiming Luka. He's not one of me.
Yeah. How about Jokic, man? That dude is I know, we know how good he is, but
I know we got to end on a high note here. He's the best player in basketball.
He's amazing, man.
You want to do it again next week?
I won't be here, man. I'll be in New York City, but I'll call in and say hi.
Wow, dude.
Yeah. But you have fun.
What? Thanks, Dan. No, I got to get Cece's number so I can make sure that I can hold you to that because it's going around your back.
No doubt, man. I'll call you from the Big Apple.
All right. Well, I look forward to it. A couple weeks from now, Dan Devone's going to be back. I'll be back next week, same time, same place, 95.7 The Game, 9 a.m. to noon. Thank you to everybody who chimed in, called in, Comcast Business Text Line as well. Big thank you to Stephen Risotto, Ken Luttrell behind the scenes, helping us get this thing done. My name is Evan Giddings saying so long. Dan Devone, EG. We're back next week on Warriors This Week. In the meantime, have a good rest of your weekend, everyone.
So, how's your research?